Programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage. I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Hello, good morning. Oh, good morning. It's 6 o'clock. It's a really good start to the show, that is. It's the 23rd of December. These are the stories that matter to you and to us on the Grey British Breakfast with me, Simon McCoy, and Rosie Wright.
Now, recent studies show Omicron is milder, vindicating Prime Minister Boris Johnson's decision to hold fire on imposing new curbs. But the studies come as daily COVID cases topped 100,000 for the first time. So with this new data offering hope, what do you think the government should do? Let us know, gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Britain is reportedly considering the rollout of a fourth jab after both Israel and Germany gave the green light to a second set of boosters. But will you accept that?
Government vaccine advisors say vulnerable primary school children should be offered a low-dose COVID vaccine. Should we be vaccinating children 5 and above?
And millions will face travel chaos over Christmas and the New Year thanks to rail strikes, airport disruption, and the busiest roads in years. Will you be going somewhere for the holiday or simply staying put?
39 places are competing to win city status as part of the Queen's Platinum Jubilee celebrations. For the first time, towns in British overseas territories are going to compete.
OK, let's start with a look through the front pages this morning. Looking at the Daily Mirror, first of all. It reports that NHS staff are urging people to get their jabs, with medics at Royal Liverpool Hospital saying that 80% of their patients are unvaccinated.
Let's look at the Eye. Omicron lower risk than Delta, but the cases hit a record, leads the Eye. Preliminary data shows a reduction of 40 to 70% in hospital stays for serious cases, but experts are concerned the sheer number of infections could overwhelm the NHS.
Telegraph says the UK is considering a fourth jab as Germany and Israel lead the way with yet another booster jab. The Joint Committee on Vaccines and Immunisation will consider if immunity levels are waning before making the decision.
The Independent takes a cautious approach to the positive Omicron news. They report concerns remain for hospitals with cases topping 100,000. Also in the paper, there are fears that replacing in-person social work appointments for children could lead to some abuse not being uncovered.
The Times also cites 2 studies showing that Omicron is less likely to cause severe disease, supporting the Prime Minister's decision to pause further restrictions.
The Guardian also leads with the news that a study has found that Omicron lowers the risk of a hospital stay by 40%. Also in the paper, ministers have promised to reset the dial on female healthcare and promises to reverse decades of gender equality through measures like increasing menopause support and reducing medical taboo.
The Financial Times leads with a start warning from energy companies that gas price rises threaten national crisis. Stratospheric wholesale gas and power prices rising will cause household bills to soar, leading to calls for ministers to protect customers.
A little bit of optimism on the front page of the Mail. Official Omicron 50% less severe. A series of studies have delivered the Prime Minister good news he wanted, vindicating him, so says the paper, in his decision to hold fire with more restrictions.
And Sajid Javid has implored unvaccinated Britons to give the country the best Christmas present by booking a COVID jab, says The Express.
And the Daily Star writes that travellers looking to get home are facing a double whammy of traffic jams and rail delays over the festive period.
So, 2 early studies suggest that people infected with the Omicron strain of COVID are less likely to need hospital treatment. Imperial College, which led one of the studies, found people with the variant are up to 45% less likely to stay in hospital than those with Delta. Research coming out of Scotland warns the mild nature of Omicron may be offset by its high transmissibility.
Well, it comes as the number of daily COVID-19 cases hit more than 100,000 for the first time in the UK. Well, to discuss this and other top stories of the day, Andrew Eborn, broadcaster and lawyer, joins us in the studio. Very good morning to you, Andrew.
Good morning. How are you both?
Very well.
I love the Christmassy ties.
I know.
It's a Christmassy tie, yeah.
Simon always does a sensational tie, but yes, festive and dinosaurs this morning.
Hey.
Christmas dinosaurs. What's not to like?
What about the tie? Absolutely, always a
Here all week.
Hey.
We've
Right.
had some good news, and this is good news for us, all of us living through this pandemic. Particularly good news for Boris Johnson, seeing that he hasn't yet made an announcement like we've seen in Wales and Scotland about how life could change from Boxing Day. He's going to enjoy these headlines.
Oh, he's going to love these headlines. It's Christmas time. There's no need to be afraid. At Christmas time, we let in light and banish shade. This is what we've been talking about. It's shining a spotlight. As we've touched on the show beforehand, variants of viruses tend to be less severe. So we knew that was going to come out. I love the headlines in a lot of the papers. Ho, ho, hope. The statistics are all over the place. People talk about 50%, 40%, 70%. The key is that it is, firstly, more transmissible, but it's less devastating in terms of hospital admissions and so on and so forth. So that is good news. And I think if you look at that sort of side, try and get the truth out there, because as we always say, there's a war against the virus. And in any war, the first casualty is the truth. So we need to look at what are the effects. We make informed decisions based on what the scientists are saying.
If I had just changed my Christmas arrangements, I would be pretty hacked off with how this has played out over the last few weeks. We've been taken to the point where we're all ready for doomsday.
Yeah.
And now this. Although we need to stress that transmissibility is the issue here. It's the high numbers rather than the difficulty it causes in terms of taking you to hospital.
Yeah, and it's in mixed messages. I mean, it's classified by this sort of wonderful cartoon where you get sort of Chris Whitty saying, don't party, effectively, and you get Boris round the corner with his blower and his wonderful party hat on and saying, well, I still want to do that. He doesn't want to break bad news. And as a result, he doesn't want to be you saw that in the press conference, where he basically sort of pushed Chris Whitty forward to answer the questions about what we have to do about making choices about who you socialise with and so on and so forth. But you're right, you have to make that informed decision. And the informed decision is, yes, it is far more transmittable, but the devastating effects are not as bad as they might be. And it's coming up, the discussions are taking place. So what they should do, and when they always say, talk to the scientists, let's follow the science, he's saying that as long as it sort of goes with the narrative. If it gives bad news, then you've got an issue with that as well.
They did give us bad news last week, and they said, be cautious, really think about how you're socialising. And the result has been devastating for business.
Yeah.
It's also been devastating for the spread of the virus, because it seems as though cases are starting to plateau. Given that, did the Prime Minister actually have a good strategy? He didn't have to impose restrictions. He just said enough to nudge us to make different decisions.
Well, I think his strategy was to push Chris Whitty forward.
It was Chris Whitty who persuaded people to do their own thing, wasn't it?
Yeah, he was the one. And it's typical Boris. He will turn around and say, OK, I don't want to be the person who gives the bad news. So he'll push somebody else forward on that sort of basis. So it's Chris Whitty who gave the bad news, and Boris was sort of saying, well, let's carry on in the normal sort of way. And what I love, I mean, it's basically Matt in his glorious cartoon. You always love Matt. It's always very good. He says, I'm hoping Christmas with my husband's family will be like the Omicron variant, not as bad as we all feared, which we love. And I think that probably is right, because fear is the thing that cripples us the most. And I think if we can make informed decisions, that's what we should be looking at. And it was Edward Bernays, the father of PR, who said the best way of selling anything is through fear. And I think if we can banish one thing for Christmas, let's banish fear, but make educated and informed decisions.
Talking about informed decisions, we've got Tony Blair appearing once again, saying that being unjabbed, well, he's pretty damning about it.
Well, he uses very inflammatory language, and that's in everywhere. The Blair scare, as we call it. Yeah. He calls them idiots. I mean, or COVID-idiots would be what a lot of people sort of saying. And he's not alone in saying that. Basically, he was saying that if you don't have if you're not vaccinated, basically you are idiots because you're being irresponsible. It's spreading it to the rest of the community and so on and so forth. And he wasn't alone in that, because we also have the Archbishop of Canterbury saying it's actually a moral choice. It's a moral choice. What he was saying is that it's about how I love my neighbour. Vaccination reduces my chances of getting ill and reduces my chances of infecting others. So I would say yes to love one another, get vaccinated, get boosted. So I think what you have to do, what Tony has to do, it's not persuasive. Emotive language is not going to persuade people. Calling them idiots is not going to persuade people. I think informed decisions is the way to do things. Look at the hospital numbers. Have a look at that sort of side. You have harrowing scenes in hospital where people are sort of saying, look, these are the people who are infected in here. This is what's happening. The majority of those who are in hospital are people who haven't been vaccinated. So again, what we would implore people to do, make an informed decision. Get the evidence, see what's happening out there, and see what we can do on that basis. But emotive language from Tony...
When you say get the evidence, that doesn't mean Google. It means...
No. Get the evidence from the scientists. And I think that's the problem, because there's so much misinformation being spread. As I say, the first casualty is the truth. And I think that's the problem. What people do, it combines. It's the way most people read newspapers, most people get their newspaper resources, is you have to get it from different sources. Most people go to evidence which they already believe, so they go to the same sort of prejudices. There are sites which will help peddle those prejudices, and they get confirmed. Get your information from different sources and make those informed decisions.
One group who've been looking very closely at all of the data is the UK Medicines Regulatory Agency. They have approved the use of the vaccine, the Pfizer dose, a smaller dose, for children in at-risk groups from age 5 and above. So lots of parents are going to have to make quite a complicated decision coming up. Should they get their 5, 6, 7-year-old vaccinated?
Yeah. And I think there are 3 reasons for that, isn't there? Firstly, the protection of the child. And people say that the risk in the child, him or herself, is minimal, is what they tend to say for a lot of people. But it's more about the transmission within the community and so on and so forth. So they say that whilst it can stop variations and variants of the particular virus. If you do that, you get everybody jabbed on that sort of basis. But also, we have to put this into context. You're right, make an informed decision, because you put the headline news, we're going to force people to have vaccines. That's not the case. We should look at vaccination in children generally. You know, from when they're small babies, they're vaccinated with all sorts of things. They have the 6-in-1 vaccine when they're just 8 weeks old. You know, we have the MMR. And you remember how that stopped measles and mumps and rubella. And you also have HPV and so on and so forth. It is not uncommon, in fact, it's very common, to get your children vaccinated. But again, make informed decisions, see what the science says, and you can do that. But let's get rid of the scaremongering and things like that.
Oh, there's a Christmas thought.
It is.
Yeah. Well, have a wonderful Christmas.
Thank you, and you.
Nice to see you.
Always a joy to see both of you, and Merry Christmas. And I'm sorry you're leaving.
Well, I'm here for the next couple of hours.
You're here for the next couple of hours. It's got to be good.
Don't go anywhere.
Thank you so much.
I'm not going yet, but thank you.
Andrew, thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Right, it is 11 minutes past 6. Let's give you an overview of what else is going on today. Wales and Northern Ireland are bringing in a series of new COVID restrictions from Boxing Day. So the things like the 2-metre social distancing rule, that's going to return in workplaces and public venues in Wales. They're also bringing back the rule of 6, so the limit on the number of people allowed to attend events. In Northern Ireland, nightclubs will close. People will be urged, but not mandated, to stick to 3 households indoors.
Spain's Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez has announced plans for mandatory face coverings outside in response to a dramatic rise in COVID-19 infections there. This comes as the Omicron variant continues to spread across Europe fast, with the World Health Organization declaring the region is once again at the epicenter of the pandemic. The mask measure will be put to ministers and signed into law before Christmas.
Ghislaine Maxwell will spend Christmas and her 60th birthday in limbo and in prison after a jury failed to reach a verdict in her sex trafficking case. Well, the jury deliberated for their 3rd day. They sent one note requesting 3 transcripts, but they didn't come to a decision. The court will break for the rest of the week over Christmas and will come back on Monday. Maxwell will then spend Christmas Day behind bars at the Metropolitan Detention Centre.
The police watchdog has rejected a complaint over how the Metropolitan Police handled allegations of a Christmas party in Number 10 last year. The force referred itself to the Independent Office for Police Conduct after a complaint from Green Party peer Baroness Jones. She argued officers outside Number 10 must have known if an unlawful gathering had taken place during lockdown. But the IOPC released a statement saying the referral was invalid.
Sally Ann Howes has died at the age of 91, her family have confirmed. The Tony Award-nominated actress first appeared on screen when she was 12. She enjoyed a career that spanned 6 decades. She was best known for playing the role of Truly Scrumptious in the 1968 musical film Chitty Chitty Bang Bang.
Sports news. Arsenal will face Liverpool in the semi-finals of the Carabao Cup, while Chelsea will take on Tottenham. Both semi-finals are scheduled to take place over 2 legs, with the first leg played in the first week of January. The deciding legs will take place the following week, with the final at Wembley on February the 27th.
Scientists have uncovered evidence for large-scale prehistoric migration into Britain that may be linked to the spread of Celtic languages. The mass movement of people originated in continental Europe and happened between 1400 BC and 870 BC. Well, the discovery helps to explain the genetic makeup of many present-day people in Britain.
The capitals of the Falkland Islands, Cayman Islands and Gibraltar are among 39 places vying to win official UK city status in a new competition. The first-time applicants join regular contenders for the title, such as Milton Keynes, in a contest held to mark the Queen's 70-year reign next year. It's the first time towns in British overseas territories and Crown dependencies have been able to apply. The winners will be announced in June.
Let's have a very brief look now at the weather. It's going to remain largely a dull day, with a band of rain sweeping across the west and the north, this falling heavy in the afternoon. The south and parts of the east will stay drier. It's a mild day for many.
Now, business leaders in Northern Ireland have slammed the country's new COVID restrictions as unacceptable and unforgivable. Stormont ministers announced yesterday that nightclubs will close from Boxing Day after its highest daily increase in coronavirus cases was recorded.
Our Northern Ireland reporter, Doogie Beattie, has more for us.
This intervention is informed by the medical and scientific advice, and it takes account of the wider economic and societal impacts. So from the 27th of December, we are asking people to limit mixing to a maximum of 3 households. There'll be guidance in terms of emphasising the importance of working from home where possible, and that's going to be strengthened. There will be a legal requirement for businesses to take reasonable measures to achieve 2-metre social distancing in office spaces or where that cannot be achieved to provide alternative mitigations. We will be encouraging regular workplace testing, and that's going to be strongly encouraged. The requirements around face coverings will be strengthened. There will be a legal duty on businesses to take all reasonable steps to minimise the transmission of COVID. There will be a requirement to be seated in indoor hospitality venues, and a maximum of 6 people can be seated together in an indoor hospitality venue. And from 6 a.m. on the 26th of December, nightclubs will be closed. Indoor dancing and indoor standing events will not be allowed.
Michelle O'Neill, the Deputy First Minister, spelling out the new regulations. Nightclubs have been open for just 7 weeks, after being closed for 87. The hospitality sector has took the financial hit once more, but just how bad is it?
Pre-COVID, we're Northern Ireland's 4th largest private sector employer. By 1/3 of all Northern agri-food, account for 2/3 of tourism spend. Today, we estimate just in the Christmas period alone, our industry has lost between 250 to 300 million. That's the money that carries us through January and February. We are officially open, but effectively closed.
It's just not hotels and bars that will suffer. The supply chain is vast and planning for pricing essential.
Well, my job as I own and run this business is we've got to set plans. We think about how we're going to sell in the next 12 months or the next 3 years. So we're used to that. So the constant stop-start nature of the last 22 months has been so difficult for me. It's been really difficult for my 650 staff, but also my 4,000 customers, as they've had to stock up, lose stock, and it's the in-out, stop-start nature I think has been the hardest. But I think we all thought we were going to have a good Christmas this year, and I think what has happened in the last few weeks has been so frustrating because we have not been given any insight, any knowledge, any help or understanding as to what's going to happen. We've stocked up, so we've got a much higher stock holding due to the realities of supply chain, due to the realities of Brexit, and Christmas hasn't happened this year. But I feel sorry for my customers who have bookings made, planning to have big parties, big gatherings in the last few days in terms of their restaurants or their hotels, and they've just been obliterated with sales, with no knowledge of what's coming next, no grants for them, and just fear. I think that's been fear and frustration, I think, have been the key things. They've been phoning me saying, Andrew, what are you hearing? So it's that unknown that I think is so difficult for our customers. We've been here time and again, last March, last kind of winter, then again in January, then again in the summer. Regulations have chopped and changed, and that is very difficult for the hospitality industry.
The hospitality sector believes that you have closed them by stealth because you haven't got the money to actually replace it. What do you say to those people in the hospitality sector that have took such a financial hit? And what do you say, more importantly, to the staff in it, that for Christmas they've basically been handed a P45?
Well, we have pressed for a wage subsidy scheme, and we want that, but we need the UK government to introduce that scheme. It was there in the past. We believe that hospitality has a particular requirement for that.
It is the workers that are going to feel the impact in terms of the decisions that have had to be taken, necessary because of the pandemic. So the Treasury should reinstate furlough immediately and allow us to reach to that, to be able to support workers through this trying time.
With no plans in place, the private sector are frustrated and hope that the government will have some forward thinking.
I think what we've got to do is get away from a battle that seems to have been raging about health versus the economy. They need to come together, and I think we would like more recognition that the private sector has a huge role to play here in Northern Ireland. We'd love to see much more inward investment and trying to grow jobs. Look, the health service has done an incredible job under incredibly difficult circumstances, but so have my lorry drivers, so have my staff and my food outlets, and lots of other hospitality industries who've kept people fed and watered throughout this pandemic. I think we need better long-term thinking, and we need government to make those tough decisions.
Douglas Beattie, GB News, Stormont.
You're watching GB News, it's the Great British Breakfast. Coming up, it's the first time that we're able to travel around the country at Christmas time for 2 years. We'll be joined by the Independent's travel editor Simon Calder, who'll tell us, well, it's not quite as good as it sounds because there's still chaos in the wings. That's to come. First, the weather.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello, good morning. Well, the weather's a good bit more unsettled now for the next few days. We've got some rain moving its way northeastwards across the UK today. Still some snow likely across northern Scotland tonight, but milder towards the southwest. And you can see we've got low pressure dominating the North Atlantic now, and this is going to be pushing in a selection of weather fronts from time to time over the next few days. Wednesday's weather fronts tended to fizzle out, but only to be replaced by the next set coming in from the southwest. So still the remnants of Wednesday's rain across central and northern Scotland, perhaps a bit of hill snow too. Elsewhere, though, a drier, perhaps briefly brighter interlude for eastern England, but otherwise we've got the next band of rain coming in from the southwest. Not too much across England and Wales, but for northern England, parts of Northern Ireland, certainly for Scotland, ended up being another quite wet day with quite persistent rain across Scotland and some hill snow developing on the northern edge of this front over the mountains. Cold in the north, but still quite mild actually in the south, temperatures well into double figures. And then a wet night to come across parts of Scotland in particular, with potential for quite significant snowfall above about 400 metres. So something to bear in mind if you're travelling in that part of the world. Elsewhere, though, we should see another drier interlude with a few clear spells coming through from time to time, and now with some damp ground, potentially for some fog patches as well. But on the whole, it will not be as cold on Christmas Eve morning as it has been for some recent mornings. So certainly watch out for the fog first thing on Christmas Eve if you have travel plans. That could take a time to clear across central southern England, parts of eastern England too. Helped though by increasing amounts of cloud and a breeze from the west. So some heavy rain coming into parts of southwest England, Wales and Northern Ireland through Christmas Eve through the day. Elsewhere though, it should be mostly dry and drier for Scotland certainly in the last couple of days. Drier but colder, we're still in the cold air here, milder air to the southwest. And the dividing line will be weather fronts. And it's along this dividing line we probably stand the greatest chance of seeing a little bit of snow through Christmas. So whilst a lot of places will be quite wet at times, quite unsettled, with some colder air to the north though, that's where your best chances of seeing some snow. Take care.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for the Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is the Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
You're watching GB News live across the UK, the world, and our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We're here for you. Don't forget to join our community by hitting the subscribe button.
And download the GB News app so you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you. Email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
Welcome back. Great British Breakfast with Rosie and Simon. It is 26 minutes past 6.
Now, there is a new campaign being launched to raise awareness of how dangerous it is to put your batteries in your rubbish and your general recycling bins. We can find out more. Our North East of England reporter Rachel Sweeney joins us live to explain more. Rachel, tell us, why is it dangerous? What should we be doing instead?
Well, they are very small, but they're also very dangerous when handled incorrectly. The problem is that not a lot of people know, but we are putting them in our bins, and the danger is that they can be crushed or punctured during processing. If that happens, they can leak toxic materials, which can then get very hot and spark and cause fires when they're next to combustible materials in other parts of the bin. Now, this is extremely dangerous. It's this time of year, isn't it, when we are out with the old and in with the new. I've brought you an example of my son's bin truck. Because this is broken. You can see where I've tried to fix it with blue tack. And that should, that's something that I would maybe think about recycling. What I didn't think about was that it has got batteries inside. And these are the things that they're telling us to think about this Christmas while we're out with the old and we're in with the new. Now, we've seen 300 incidents like this in England over the last year. 19 of them in my patch in Gateshead, Sunderland and South Tyneside. There was one particular incident in Gateshead where a fire started because of a battery, and you can see how far it actually spread. These types of fires are very difficult to extinguish. They are very challenging for our fire services, and they have a detrimental effect on the environment. Another fire started at a waste collection truck on the A1. That load had to be dumped on the A1. Now, that's our busiest road. That cost so much money because it caused so much disruption. I've been speaking to Mark Morley from Gateshead Council, who tells us what we should be doing.
All suppliers of batteries over 32 kilograms, so any big supermarket, big retailer will sell more than 32 kilograms of batteries per year. They have a duty to take back your old batteries. It's not totally advertised, but they do have a duty to that, so you can take them back to wherever you purchase your batteries from, as long as they have sold over that figure. So your key supermarkets, DIY stores will all sell over that weight. So we'd encourage people to take them back and recycle them that way. Also, you can take them to local household waste recycling centres operated by local authorities. And also, as a council in Gateshead, we do have most of our key public buildings that will have collection points for batteries. So there are numerous places where you can take them and recycle them.
Everything from remotes to toys. We are clearing out all of our bits and bobs this Christmas, waiting for Santa's presents. But you're being asked to think about what you're putting in the bin, what is inside these items, and the dangers that it could cause. It is putting lives at risk of waste recycling workers. Do think about that. Stay safe and do your recycling.
Rachel, thank you very much. That's Rachel Sweeney, and we'll be hearing more from her throughout the morning.
Now, at 6:30, this is the first Christmas getaway for 2 years. It's led to high demand for leisure journeys by road, rail, air. A survey for Watchdog Transport Focus found that 44% plan to travel to visit friends or family over the festive period. Coronavirus restrictions meant many of us missed out, clearly, on visits like that last year.
Well, according to RAC analysis, 4.1 million people will hit the roads today, while 5.3 million will be travelling on Christmas Eve. Well, Simon Calder is the travel editor of The Independent. So, first of all, let's talk about the roads. I mean, you were just looking at the Daily Star. Yeah. I'm driving slowly home for Christmas is their headline. They're going to be busy, aren't they?
Well, look, I wouldn't panic too much, because we're going to see very, very little of the normal rush hour. Because Christmas Eve is a Friday, there's not actually going to be that many people showing up for work, possibly not even you. And so, therefore, I will be looking at what's happening on the roads, in particular those fun spots of the M25, the M1, M6, and, of course, the M5 heading between Birmingham and Bristol. So there's going to be, there's going to be some tricky spots. I think it's actually going to be worse after Christmas, when we all decide we're going to go shopping all at once. But of course, if you want to avoid the traffic, then it's just very easy, matter of going early or late, because otherwise people are all going to get up about sort of 8 or 9, and then all head off together. But I think I'm much more confident about the roads than I am about the railways.
Well, the trains, I mean, yesterday I was just going through the latest news. Almost every single network has got cancellations, delays or warnings of both. But in part, really, not because of high passenger numbers, but because a lot of the staff have got coronavirus.
Oh, absolutely. And there are no high passenger numbers. I've done yesterday I went around the main London terminal stations. They were ghost towns, basically. But if you do need to get to or from London, then it's going to be tough. I'll get to the rest of the country in a minute, because you've got, for example, LNER, which runs on the East Coast Main Line. They've cut out a dozen trains between Leeds and London, 4 between Lincoln and London, because of train crew. Elsewhere on the network, Avanti West Coast making short-term cancellations on the route from London to West Midlands, North West England and southern Scotland. And that is repeated pretty much everywhere, because, of course, there's a finite number of train crew, and if everyone is either sadly suffering from COVID or isolating because they've been in contact with somebody, then it is very messy. And then, well, talking about the whole country, there is one great train operator which unites the whole place from Aberdeen to Penzance, and that's cross country. And the RMT union has decided to go on strike on Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve. Finish the year in style, eh? And that is exactly the last thing that the rail traveller and the rail industry needs.
What's that about?
Well, funnily enough, it's the role of guards.
Wow.
Now, this dispute... Yes, this has been dragging on pretty much since the birth of the railways. And the RMT union has, and I absolutely support everybody's right to strike, and they can very happily, as they have done for decades, exploit effectively their monopoly position and extract concessions from train operators who want to increase productivity, who want to improve customer service. And they're doing this. And, as far as the union's concerned, it's probably, we know how this goes. We go on strike and then they cave in. But I'm not sure, with the railways effectively under government control and an absolute collapse in fare revenue, that it's going to work this time, because they may just be overplaying their hands. The rail industry effectively needs Rishi Sunak to come up with £5 billion to make up for the shortfall in rail in ticket revenue. And if you've got everybody pulling together, I think he might be more inclined than if you've got the RMT saying, come on. Even though nobody in the rail industry unbelievably lost their jobs because of COVID, we still want to keep the old ways in operation.
There was a time where a railway strike would benefit airlines. I mean, how are they operating over Christmas?
Well, they're in a bit of a mess, frankly. Domestically, there's going to be an awful lot of people flying, particularly, of course, Northern Ireland, to and from there, between London and Scotland particularly. But the airlines are having a really tough time on a couple of fronts. First of all, they are having the same issues as every other industry. People testing positive for COVID, they can't work, they've got to isolate. On top of that, of course, the rules keep changing. Last weekend, we saw the French coming in with a travel ban, then the Germans coming in with a travel ban. The Austrians overnight have put in more complicated rules. And so the poor old traveller is just thinking, actually, I'll tell you what, I'll stay here. And this is continuing to wreck the airlines' finances at a time of year when they should really be making an absolute mint. It's normally the only profitable time of the entire winter.
It's going to be a busy few days. Is there any sense in which this shift to working from home means there will be less pressure on those specific days, Christmas Eve, because lots of people have been able to travel earlier and work at their sort of holiday destination from their desk already on holiday?
Oh, absolutely. We will see a lot of that on the roads, I think, and certainly on the railways. I mean, there's one train operator, Greater Anglia, which has basically just said, we're running fewer trains, not because our excellent staff have COVID, but because there simply aren't passengers. It would be ridiculous to run empty trains. So, I think in the new year we could well see some more scaling down, which is why for anybody in the rail industry it's really important to be absolutely at the top of their game. And anybody who's travelling, please, if you're frustrated because your train's been cancelled, you're going to be an hour late, it's all a complete mess, please be nice to the staff. The frontline staff in the railways have had a really tough time over the past couple of years, and they are doing their best.
Well, that's nicely put, but it is really frustrating for travellers, on top of the year everybody's had, to then have this weekend where we're being allowed to travel, sort of, to then find, we can't actually, because the services aren't there.
Yeah, sure.
I understand why people get a bit miffed.
Certainly, yeah. And on the way that the train operators are running it is, so for instance, London North West Railway, they are saying, OK, we're going to close a couple of branch lines, Watford to St Albans, Bletchley to Bedford, so we've got more crew to work on the really important ones, and they put buses in. So I'm afraid you could be on the rail replacement bus service. And I just hope, in a spirit of Christmas, that the RMT and Cross Country are still talking, and they might find some way of beating this strike. Otherwise, if you're travelling from anywhere from Penzance to Aberdeen, Manchester to Bournemouth, you can have...
Simon, people plan these trips. This is the one period of the way you plan, so it's going to be too late for most people.
Well, yes. I mean, there's one concession, which is that if you were booked to go tomorrow on cross-country trains, you can use your ticket today without any problem. But I agree.
That's not great. And I don't think there's anything like a Christmas spirit to say rail replacement bus service.
No,
honestly.
I know, it's not. Yeah.
And one quick thing I want to ask you about. We mentioned this earlier. You could go on holiday in the future to a UK city not in the UK.
Oh, it's so exciting. Yes, you've been covering this.
Exciting or bizarre?
This is about city status.
Yeah, city status. OK, so now, first of all, declaration of interest, if I may. I come from Crawley, where there is quite a campaign for city status. I know it's still in the UK.
Crawley?
Crawley, yeah.
That's not the best indicator.
No, but I'm just declaring my interest in
It can
this.
keep campaigning.
And there is a campaign for the airport, Gatwick, to be renamed Gareth Southgate, Crawley's most famous son. Anyway, but leaving that aside, there is going to be there's perhaps a more serious tussle between Dunfermline and Middlesbrough for city status, and also these British overseas territories. So
Falkland Islands?
Falkland Islands, Port Stanley, yeah. I mean, it is ridiculous that Port Stanley, OK, they've only got, 2,400 people, but they're still doing better than St David's in Wales, which has got a few hundred fewer. And so I would say, of course, it's got to be a proper city. I was amazed that it wasn't one. Gibraltar, of course, it's a city. I mean, you've been there. It's a really busy, thriving place. So that needs to be a city. And a few of the other ones, for goodness sake. It's a badge they can wear with pride, and we all need a bit of that these days.
Well, go Crawley.
Thank you.
We wish you well with that campaign, however long that lasts. Have a very good Christmas.
Thank you very much.
It happens to be your birthday on Christmas Day
does,
as well,
yes.
which is, I think, probably the worst day to have a birthday. But wow, enjoy it.
Well, thank you very much indeed, and to you, happy Christmas.
Nice to see you.
Thank you.
Let's hope 2022 is better than 2021.
Let's hope. Right, it is coming up to 20 minutes to 7 here on the programme. The pandemic, of course, continues to put significant strain on our pubs. How many have vanished from our communities over the past year? We're looking at the state of the industry after this.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Welcome back to the Great British Breakfast. Rosie and Simon, it's just after 20 to 7.
Now, the number of pubs closing their doors in England and Wales has largely flatlined and is in line with pre-pandemic levels. New analysis shows that over 400 pubs have shut this year, and although that sounds pretty dire, it's lower than in 2019. Fears remain, though, that phasing out of the financial support in the last few months, plus Christmas cancellations in the wake of the Omicron variant, may lead to many closures in the future.
Ian Cass is the Managing Director at the Forum of British Pubs. Ian, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Nice to see you. I mean, we for weeks have been talking about the demise of pubs, and yet the figures suggest it's no worse than it has been in the last couple of years.
Yeah, I think it's a difficult situation. There are undoubtedly lots of we are losing a large number of pubs at the moment. Sometimes for quite reasonable reasons. People have changed their drinking habits. Areas might not be as popular, but also we are seeing the sector is under an awful lot of pressure at the moment, and in many cases, the people that run those pubs are doing so with increased debts. That just the amount of money that they owe, and the debts are very, very high. And I fear that if this Christmas is as bad as I think it will be in many cases for people, we are going to see an even larger number of closures in January.
That was really interesting what you just said, that for some of these pubs, it's actually about the changing in our drinking habits. How have you seen that shift? Do you think there's been a significant number of us that says we're not going to drink as much alcohol, which has then crippled your industry?
I think it would be naive to say that people haven't changed their behaviour. This is, 2 years of closures, lockdowns, social distancing, people drinking at home. I think some, behaviour has changed. People's behaviour has changed. They're not, in some cases, they're not drinking in the same way. But that isn't to say, I think there's another dynamic that's going on here as well. I think you've got some pub, the pub traditionally owned by a brewery, and the pub was a shop window for its products. And they were very interested in keeping the pub going because it sold their products. What you've also got at the moment is you've got quite a large number of pub-owning businesses that aren't brewers anymore. They are commercial landlords. And the fact that those pubs, the fact that the commercial properties that they have happen to sell beer is a bit of inconvenience to them. And there's a commercial reality going on here that in some cases, those landlords, the property is worth more to change of use. If you've got a Cotswold pub with a beer garden, a bowling green and a car park in a lovely part of the world, it might only be worth, say, 400 grand as a pub. But actually, if you could get change of use on that, say it was not viable, you can redevelop it for 12 houses and it's worth £4 million. So there's an element of that going on as well, I think, in terms of the closures, but also the figures that show that I think there's about 38 a month that are actually going to change of use, being demolished or change of use. So there's that going on as well.
It's interesting just to see that where pubs in this country are. The most popular areas for pubs are the southwest of England and the northwest of England. Is that right?
Is that the most closures?
No, they've got the highest number of pubs. There are 5,739 pubs in the southwest, 5,361 in the northwest. So they are thriving in certain parts of the country, despite what else is going on.
Oh, I mean, don't go. The pub model is good. It's part of our heritage. There isn't a soap opera on British TV that hasn't got a pub at the centre of it. Pubs are something that we should be very proud of, and it's a big part of our culture. And yes, I mean, some of them are doing very well, but quite a lot of them aren't at the moment. You've only got to walk. Simon Calder that you had on before talking about rail terminals being ghost towns. Well, walk around some of the UK towns at the moment, and at 8:30 at night, they're empty. There's nobody there. Not the picture in the whole country. It does vary, but generally the picture isn't a good one at the moment. There've been all these cancellations coming up to Christmas. A lot of people seem to be going out earlier and not staying out late. A number of the pubs are closing early. Some days they're not serving food. So it's not, believe you me, it isn't a particularly rosy picture at the moment. There are always some exceptions and some places doing quite well. But generally, the pub sector in particular is under a lot of pressure, and particularly where it's a pub tenant rather than a manager for a big chain, where the tenant is a little business owner in their own right. They operate on this thing called the tie, where they have to buy all their products through the particular pub owning company that they've got, very often paying double the market rate for certain of their products, and also paying a very high rent on the building. They're the people that I really fear for at the moment, in particular, is those pub tenants, a lot of whom are under an awful lot of pressure.
Ian, just really quickly, we're seeing news that Omicron isn't going to potentially be as worse as initially feared. Some of the restrictions that have come into place in Wales or Scotland are bad for pubs, but they're not absolutely crippling. Are you feeling a little bit of optimism going into Christmas?
Not really. It's Christmas is so important to the trade. That's December, few weeks and into January plays a massive part in the pub's economy. They make a hell of a lot of money then. It gets them through the quiet times. Asking people to drink outside in the middle of January, difficult. And people are generally quite scared. A lot of the messaging coming from government isn't clear, and it seems to have scared a lot of people. So, I hope that the industry is a very robust one. The people that are in it are good people, and they'll do their best to keep the pubs open. But I do think the pressure that they're under at the moment is unheard of. One thing I would say, there's a local brewery near us that made the point. They stayed open during the First World War, the Second World War and Spanish flu. But COVID has absolutely decimated them and closed a lot of them down. So it is a difficult time.
It is, and we need our pubs. I do, most of them.
Absolutely.
Ian, it's really good of you to join us. Thank you very much, Ian Cass. Good to see you.
Now, coming up here on the programme, COVID restrictions mean that some sports are going to be quite limited across Scotland, but skiing is thriving, particularly as now you can't go to France to ski there. We'll tell you why after the weather.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello, good morning. Well, the weather's a good bit more unsettled now for the next few days. We've got some rain moving its way northeastwards across the UK today. Still some snow likely across northern Scotland tonight, but milder towards the southwest. And you can see we've got low pressure dominating the North Atlantic now, and this is going to be pushing in a selection of weather fronts from time to time over the next few days. Wednesday's weather fronts tending to fizzle out, but only to be replaced by the next set coming in from the southwest. So still the remnants of Wednesday's rain across central and northern Scotland, perhaps a bit of hill snow too. Elsewhere, though, a drier, perhaps briefly brighter interlude for eastern England, but otherwise we've got the next band of rain coming in from the southwest. Not too much across England and Wales, but for northern England, parts of Northern Ireland, certainly for Scotland, ended up being another quite wet day with quite persistent rain across Scotland and some hill snow developing on the northern edge of this front over the mountains. Cold in the north, but still quite mild actually in the south, temperatures well into double figures. And then a wet night to come across parts of Scotland in particular, with potential for quite significant snowfall above about 400 metres. So something to bear in mind if you're travelling in that part of the world. Elsewhere, though, we should see another drier interlude with a few clear spells coming through from time to time, and now with some damp ground, potentially for some fog patches as well. But on the whole, it will not be as cold on Christmas Eve morning as it has been for some recent mornings. So certainly watch out for the fog first thing on Christmas Eve if you have travel plans. That could take a time to clear across central southern England, parts of eastern England too. Helped though by increasing amounts of cloud and a breeze from the west. So some heavy rain coming into parts of southwest England, Wales and Northern Ireland through Christmas Eve through the day. Elsewhere though, it should be mostly dry, and drier for Scotland certainly in the last couple of days. Drier but colder. We're still in the cold air here, mild air to the southwest. And the dividing line will be weather fronts. And it's along this dividing line we probably stand the greatest chance of seeing a little bit of snow through Christmas. So whilst a lot of places will be quite wet at times, quite unsettled, with some colder air to the north though, that's where your best chances of seeing some snow. Take care.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
A very good morning. Welcome back to the Great British Breakfast. It is 7 minutes to 7. Now let's give you an overview.
She put a smile on your face in the morning. She puts one on mine because you just smile and laugh.
There's a different dynamic across this desk normally most mornings. You know, cheerful and I don't know. Your suggestions, please.
Well, grumpy is
Grumpy
not
maybe.
Mr. Grumpy and Miss Cheerful. Here we are.
GBNews at gbnews.uk if you have a different description of Simon, maybe. Let's give you an overview, though, back to the important stuff of what actually is going on today. Wales and Northern Ireland are bringing in a series of new COVID restrictions from Boxing Day. So that's things like the 2-metre social distancing rule. That's going to return to not only workplaces, but public venues as well in Wales. They're bringing back the rule of 6 with a limit on the number of people allowed to attend events. In Northern Ireland, nightclubs are going to close. People will be urged, but not mandated, to stick to 3 households indoors.
A new version of the Pfizer COVID jab has been approved for use in children in the UK. The Medicines and Healthcare Agency gave the green light to the jab for 5 to 11-year-olds who are at risk or in contact with those who are vulnerable. The Welsh Health Minister has said it will implement a rollout of vaccines for at-risk children in the new year.
Spain's Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez has announced plans for mandatory face coverings outside. That's in response to the dramatic rise in COVID-19 infections. It comes as the Omicron variant continues to spread across Europe fast. The World Health Organization have again declared that Europe is again at the epicenter of the pandemic. The mask measure will be put to ministers and signed into law before Christmas.
Sally Ann Howes has died at the age of 91. That's confirmed by her family overnight. The Tony Award-nominated actress first appeared on our screens when she was 12 and enjoyed a career that spanned 6 decades. She was best known, of course, for playing the role of Truly Scrumptious in the 1968 musical film Chitty Chitty Bang Bang.
In sport, Arsenal will face Liverpool in the semi-finals of the Carabao Cup, while Chelsea take on Tottenham. Both semi-finals are scheduled to take place over 2 legs, with the first leg played in the first week of January. The deciding legs will take place the following week, with the final at Wembley on February the 27th.
Now, COVID restrictions mean that some sports are limited across Scotland, but one is thriving. Skiers and ski-boarders are flocking to the Cairngorms to enjoy the snow and the outdoors.
Our Scotland reporter, David Johnson, has more.
It's a long, winding climb up to the highest ski resort in the Cairngorms. On the 8-mile trek from Aviemore, you'll pass stunning scenery and tourist attractions such as Loch Morlich, reindeer and much more. And this year, those at the ski resort are hoping for a good season with plenty of snow.
This year, we don't know if, with the pandemic, the variations, the changes, are people going abroad or they cancel their holidays. We expect to be very busy over Christmas and New Year. The challenge will be having enough snow to manage people's expectations. So there might be a period we might have to restrict numbers on the mountain compared to how much snow we've got. But keep an eye on the forecast, we play it by ear and hopefully accommodate as many as we can safely. But also keep in our mind that a lot of people want to come here to ski and we need more natural snow to get more of the mountain open.
There are 32 kilometres of slopes and 35 different runs within the ski area. The Cairngorms National Park is home to 3 of Scotland's 5 ski centres, which attracts visitors from far and wide.
Very different from the Alps, in as much as this is very rolling, gentle scenery, but it's beautiful. And yes, it is impressive. I didn't expect it to be as high. That sounds a bit silly.
A new snow factory at the Cairngorm Mountain provides skiing for all levels of experience. It will also help provide access from the lower slopes to the mid-station for the upper lifts.
The Techno-Alpine Snow Factory there produces snow at any temperature, so it's been on for the last month, pumping out big mounds of snow, and our piece machines will smooth all that out before opening day to create a beginner area for ski schools and beginners. So if that's all we've got for the opening day, we'll probably reach our numbers quite quickly, so we just have to hope for more natural snow to come so we get more skiing available. This summer actually we've been very busy. We have a kids play park down here we open in the summer with a tubing slide and a little zip slide. That's been exceptionally busy. Many people come to see that and spend in the cafes and restaurants, so we've had a good busy summer. So hopefully we can continue that through the winter.
The summer was clearly a huge success, and it's hopeful this will continue throughout the season.
I don't know, just seeing snow cheers you up, doesn't it?
It does. Yes, I've heard, though, that the conditions there are quite difficult to get really right for skiing. So you get very misty, or a day when it's raining. That's pretty grim, skiing in the rain. So I think a day where you've got beautiful blue skies and fresh snow is quite tricky in Scotland.
Is it? Okay.
Sorry to put a bit of gloom, but we're not going to be skiing in France anytime soon, so...
No.
We're talking about Christmas plans.
My idea of skiing is...
Can you ski, actually?
What?
Can you ski?
I can fall spectacularly.
Oh.
The people shout, clear the mountain as I come down, because there will always be a fluff of snow.
It being particularly elegant.
Sorry?
I can't imagine it being particularly elegant.
Nice, yes, charming.
Talking about plans, the Queen's Christmas plans, I feel for her a little bit because her public plans have had to change and we have to scrutinise them for some reason every single time. But her plans have been thrown into further chaos after Princess Anne's husband joined the thousands of Brits facing isolation over the Christmas period. Royal Navy Vice Admiral Sir Timothy Lawrence is recovering from coronavirus, and that means, of course, Anne won't be able to go and spend Christmas Day with the Queen, so the Queen won't be spending the day with her daughter.
Well, she's already spending, of course, her first Christmas without her husband, Prince Philip, who died earlier this year. She will be at Windsor. She's not at Sandringham, which is where they normally have Christmas, so it's another blow for Her Majesty on what has been a difficult year. We'll be back in just a moment.
A very good morning. Thursday, the 23rd of December. These are the stories that matter to you and to us on the Great British Breakfast with Simon McCoy and Rosie Wright.
Now, recent studies show that Omicron is milder, vindicating Prime Minister Boris Johnson's decision to hold fire on imposing new curbs. But the study comes to show that daily COVID cases topped 100,000 for the first time. So with this new data offering some hope, what do you think the government should do? Let us know. GBviews at gbnews.uk.
Britain is reportedly considering the rollout of a fourth jab after both Israel and Germany gave the green light to a second set of boosters.
Government vaccine advisors say vulnerable primary school children should be offered a low-dose COVID vaccine, but should we be vaccinating children as young as 5 years old?
Millions of us are going to face chaotic travel plans over Christmas and the New Year thanks to a combination of rail strikes, airport disruption and the busiest roads in years. Are you going somewhere for the holiday, or perhaps you're staying put?
And 39 places are competing to win city status as part of the Queen's Platinum Jubilee celebrations. For the first time, towns in British overseas territories will compete.
Welcome back to the programme. Now, there is an early glimmer of some positivity. 2 studies suggest that people infected with the Omicron strain of coronavirus are less likely to need hospital treatment. Imperial College, which led one of the studies, found people with the variant are up to 45% less likely to stay in hospital than those with Delta. But research coming out of Scotland warns the mild nature of Omicron may be offset by its high transmissibility. That comes as the daily number of COVID cases hit more than 100,000 for the first time in the UK.
Professor Andrew Preston is a microbiologist at the University of Bath and joins us this morning. Good morning to you. Is this as positive as we'd like it to be?
Probably about as positive as it's going to be at the moment. It sort of backs up the data that has been much discussed coming out of South Africa. So it does appear, at least in the cases we've seen, as you've just stated, that you do have a reduced risk of ending up in hospital if you do catch Omicron. But on the flip side, you've got a far greater risk of catching it in the first place. So how those two balance out as it spreads through into the older population, those with comorbidities, we still just don't know, I'm afraid.
Some countries, we just mentioned it there, Israel, Germany, they're talking about the fourth jab already.
Indeed, it looks as if you need very high antibody levels induced by the current vaccines in order to combat that hyperinfectivity of Omicron. So, if your aim is to maintain a population with those extraordinarily high levels of antibodies, at the moment the only way we have doing that is really regular boosters. Or high levels of infection. I think we'll end up with either and or possibly both in the UK. But how long that situation will last, I'm not sure. So I think rather than constant boosting, if we're still concerned by the threat of future variants, or if Omicron sticks around for a long time, then it's going to require the modified vaccines, I think, to provide the long-term protection we'd all like.
Given that from day one, all our restrictions have been about the NHS, protecting the NHS, easing the pressure on them. If the Omicron variant gives you a 40% lower risk of ending up in hospital, are we heading to the point where it's going to be just like the flu?
It's not necessarily going to be just like the flu. I think that can be dangerous to make that sort of extrapolation, because there's clear distinctions in the way that the virus behaves. Asymptomatic infection, for example, makes it so much more difficult to control. But I take your point that. And I think it will be with, something we have to decide. Do we now end all restrictions and not even have it, isolation for this, and treat it as yet another respiratory virus? I think with its level of virulence and its the level of infectivity, and the fact it's so difficult to spot carriers of the virus because of this asymptomatic carriage, I don't think we're at that point yet. But if this continues for much longer, then that will be a conversation that we need to have.
One conversation that's just starting is about the vaccination of children really, from 5 onwards. Do you think it's a wise move?
Personally, yes, at least to make it available to those that would like to have it. Of course, we're not talking mandatory vaccination, nor do I think we should. So if it works that people shouldn't be forced into having the vaccine, I don't see why there's an argument against those that want it not being able to take it. So again, this is, at the moment, for those 5 to 11-year-olds who are vulnerable themselves, all living with someone who is highly vulnerable. And given that, we do know that children can bring it home, and particularly with, again, the increased infectivity of the Omicron, I think that's a sensible step.
When we are presented each day with the daily figures for infections, hospitalizations, is that actually useful? Because that is very much driving the fear. But when we're given, thousands of people are suffering with Omicron or whatever, and then we're now seeing that actually there's a much lower risk of ending up in hospital with this, is there a danger that we're being led by figures that are actually misleading?
Well, the figures all we really have to go on at the moment. If the pressure on the NHS is our key driver for making decisions, then actually those the number of beds available, the number of people that are being admitted to hospital, maybe every day taking each figure in isolation is perhaps not much use, but certainly the trend, and if that trend becomes fixed in a certain trajectory, that's an early warning system. It's about as early warning system as we're going to get. So I think that is still useful, whether it needs to be published and headline every day. Clearly at the moment it's been a significant leap last week up to the levels we have now. So of course that I think that is in itself newsworthy, but it's really the trajectory and the trend in those figures that I think is more informative.
The public were told by Professor Chris Whitty to use utmost caution in our socialising, in our Christmas Day plans. Now they see this news waking up, Omicron less likely to be serious, say experts. Might this generate a bit of a shift in the public mentality to think we don't really need to be cautious?
It could well do. But again, I think, to be fair, the message was, whilst there is still such great uncertainty and whilst the risk of the NHS being completely overwhelmed, that was the time to be cautious. Of course, the caveat to that was, if this turns out not to be a significant threat, and we don't think the NHS is going to be as majorly impacted, then of course the idea was that we could relax somewhat. So it was caution in the face of the great uncertainty. I think we also need to be mindful that, we're talking about huge reductions in risk. They're not massive reductions, they're 40 to 50%. So, you're not even talking a halving necessarily of your risk in some cases. And if you've then still got 3 to 4 to 5 times as many infections in a numbers game, which is what the NHS is dealing with, that still spells potentially a serious situation. And most of those cases in those early studies were relatively young folk. And we have yet to see the real impact if it gets into the older age groups or into certain cohorts, care homes or those that are really trying to shield from this. And I think that's our big concern. But certainly at the moment, that reduction was welcome news.
Andrew, we haven't really spoken much about long COVID recently. Are we any nearer understanding what it is and maybe getting to some sort of treatment?
We're getting closer, but whether there's real treatments available or not, we're talking about, possibly not one condition. We're possibly talking about a whole range. If you look at the list of symptoms that long COVID sufferers are suffering from and the length of time, this is not the virus necessarily. This is the body's response to that infection. So we're talking about really complex immune conditions, we think. The range of tissues involved, the range of symptoms and degrees of severity suggest that it's probably not a singular condition. And that, of course, that means then you're having to undergo multiple different investigations and come up with multiple different cures for those conditions. So I'm afraid we've seen thousands and thousands of people still suffering. I think that those breakthroughs will come, but it's a very slow process at the moment.
Well, it's really good of you to join us once again, Andrew Preston, Professor Andrew Preston, thanks very much for your time this morning.
Now it's 7:09. Let's give you an overview of what else is happening today. Wales and Northern Ireland are they've announced a series of new COVID restrictions from Boxing Day. The 2-metre social distancing rule will return to workplaces and public venues. Plus, they're also bringing back the rule of 6 in Wales with a limit on the number of people allowed to attend events. In Northern Ireland, nightclubs will close. People will be urged, but not mandated, to stick to 3 households indoors.
Spain's Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez has announced plans for mandatory face coverings outside in response to a dramatic rise in COVID-19 infections there. Comes as the Omicron variant continues to spread across Europe fast, with the World Health Organization declaring the region once again the epicentre of the pandemic. The mask measure will be put to ministers and signed into law before Christmas.
Ghislaine Maxwell will spend Christmas and her 60th birthday in limbo and in prison after a jury failed to reach a verdict in her sex trafficking case. The jury deliberated for their 3rd day and sent 1 note requesting 3 transcripts. They didn't come to a decision. The court will now break for the rest of the week over Christmas and will come back on Monday. So Maxwell will spend Christmas Day behind bars at the Metropolitan Detention Centre.
Sally Ann Howes has died at the age of 91. The Tony Award-nominated actress first appeared on screen when she was just 12. She enjoyed a career that spanned 6 decades. She was, of course, best known for playing the role of Truly Scrumptious in the 1968 musical film Chitty Chitty Bang Bang.
In sport, Arsenal will face Liverpool in the semi-finals of the Carabao Cup, while Chelsea take on Tottenham. Both semi-finals are scheduled to take place over 2 legs. The first played in the first week of January. The deciding ones will take place the following week, with the final at Wembley on February the 27th.
Scientists have uncovered evidence for a large-scale prehistoric migration into Britain that may be linked to the spread of Celtic languages. The mass movement of people originated in continental Europe and happened between 1400 BC and 870 BC. The discovery helps to explain the genetic makeup of many present-day people in Britain.
The capitals of the Falkland Islands, Cayman Islands and Gibraltar are among 39 places vying to win official UK city status in a new competition. The first-time applicants join regular contenders for the title in a contest held to mark the Queen's 70-year reign next year. It's the first time towns in British overseas territories and Crown dependencies have been able to apply. Winners will be announced in June.
Look at the weather. Today it's going to be remaining largely dull with a band of rain sweeping across the west and the north, this falling heavy in the afternoon. The south and parts of the east will stay drier. It's it's going to be a mild day for many.
Now, the police watchdog has rejected a complaint over how the Metropolitan Police handled allegations of a Christmas party in number 10 Downing Street last year. The force referred itself to the Independent Office for Police Conduct after a complaint from the Green Party peer, Baroness Jones. She argued officers outside number 10 must have known if an unlawful gathering had taken place during lockdown. But the IOPC released a statement saying the referral was invalid.
Well, Fraser Myers is deputy editor at Spite Online. And Fraser, what do you make of this? It would be obvious to any police officer, presumably in Downing Street, what's going on just yards away.
Yeah, presumably a police officer can't allow that to be happening under their nose, or can't have not noticed. I mean, it was such a large gathering. We've all seen those pictures in the Downing Street garden. But then on the other hand, you have to think, looking back at it, should the police be investigating these things retrospectively? Should they be looking at breaches of the law of something that is no longer law? I do, in one sense, understand the police's current position on that. If anything, we should be, having seen all of the kind of elite rule breakers, all of the government rule breakers, we should be decriminalising what's gone on in the past. We should be handing back people's fines. We should not be pursuing these cases of lockdown breakers, sometime dark in the early days of the pandemic. I think it's probably time to move on from that period. Unfortunately, there are some governments, even in this country, in Wales, Northern Ireland and Scotland, who would like to take us back to those dark days.
What do you think is the specific problem? Is it the actions of the politicians who had the gatherings? Is it the police who seem not to investigate it? What's the actual issue?
Well, I think it's a bit of both. I think people are rightly angry at the hypocrisy of the politicians in the garden. Now, they knew that was relatively safe. They knew it was safe to gather outdoors, and they knew that they could do so sensibly without infecting each other. They did not extend that courtesy to us. If you recall back at that time, I think it was in May 2020, it was still illegal to sit on a park bench. It was judged that you couldn't be trusted to sit around for more than a few seconds without somehow that turning into a large gathering and some super spreader event. I mean, it was completely crazy. It really didn't take the public seriously at all. So that's one key problem. And again, yes, the police clearly. The police have been cracking down really, really hard on lockdown rule breakers. Sometimes the police have been enforcing laws that don't even exist. So you might recall, last Easter, I think it was, when the police were investigating what people were putting in their shopping bags, seeing if they were picking up Easter eggs and things like that, because they were considered non-essential. There wasn't even a law around that, and yet the police were enforcing it. And yet now we have this case, seemingly, where people are breaking the law, but they're politicians and the police have turned a blind eye. So people have every right to be angry about this.
You use the phrase turning a blind eye. I mean, Baroness Jones puts it far more strongly. She says that there is a case to answer for the police aiding and abetting a criminal offence or deliberately failing to enforce the law in favour of government, politicians and their staff.
Well, yes, potentially that's true. I mean, I find it staggering to believe that police were not there, but then again, if you think about the actual circumstances, it's just it might have been right to use discretion. What they were doing was fundamentally not unsafe. It might have been in breach of the rules, but it was not unsafe. It's just a shame that the police and the authorities were never able to, take that kind of pragmatic view to the rest of us, unfortunately.
What's your view of how this has played out with the public in terms of the reputation of the police and also the politicians there, and potentially the person who leaked the photograph and probably sat on it for the last 18 months or so?
I think this has completely undermined any public trust in the sort of public health messaging, and certainly in the government. I mean, we've seen, Boris's authority has tanked. The Conservative Party are tanking in the polls. I think people are really rightly very angry about this. They can see that it's one rule for them and one rule for us. As far as the police are concerned, this comes after basically an annus horribilis for the police. We've had the Sarah Everard case of a a sitting police officer being caught with murder. We've had police officers, reprimanded and potentially sentenced to jail for taking pictures and selfies with the bodies of murder victims. I mean, it's just been disaster upon disaster for the police this year. And yeah, I think the whole kind of apparatus of government, every aspect of the state, whether it's now public health, the police, the government, the executive, is now sort of held with a bit of distrust by the public at the moment.
And huge pressure on Cressida Dick, but she still remains as the Met Police Commissioner.
It's a miracle that she still remains, because that is, this is yet another one of her failures. I mean, we recently had the inquiry into the inquest into the Stephen Port murders, and we saw a litany of police failures, and Cressida Dick was named as someone who was responsible for that. We also had another inquiry into the murder of Daniel Morgan came out this year, which named the Met Police as institutionally corrupt, and again explicitly called out Cressida Dick for her failings. This is also the woman who was responsible for the operation that led to the unlawful killing of John Charles de Menezes. So you do wonder how many disasters can Cressida Dick weather, but she's having her contract extended. It's extraordinary. So all of these failures, again, compound people's distrust with the police, the distrust with the state. There's just this sense that they are detached from accountability and detached from any kind of common sense.
Well, Fraser, it's always good to hear from you. Fraser Myers from Spiked Online, thank you very much for your time this morning.
Now it's 20 minutes past 7, just coming up to here on the programme next. The Chancellor announced £1 billion of support for the hospitality industry earlier this week. What's the reaction been? Is it really enough? That's after the weather.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello, good morning. Well, the weather's a good bit more unsettled now for the next few days. We've got some rain moving its way northeastwards across the UK today. Still some snow likely across northern Scotland tonight, but milder towards the southwest. And you can see we've got low pressure dominating the North Atlantic now, and this is going to be pushing in a selection of weather fronts from time to time over the next few days. Wednesday's weather fronts tended to fizzle out, but only to be replaced by the next set coming in from the southwest. So still the remnants of Wednesday's rain across central and northern Scotland, perhaps a bit of hill snow too. Elsewhere, though, a drier, perhaps briefly brighter interlude for eastern England, but otherwise we've got the next band of rain coming in from the southwest. Not too much across England and Wales, but for northern England, parts of Northern Ireland, certainly for Scotland, ended up being another quite wet day with quite persistent rain across Scotland and some hill snow developing on the northern edge of this front over the mountains. Cold in the north, but still quite mild actually in the south, temperatures well into double figures. And then a wet night to come across parts of Scotland in particular, with potential for quite significant snowfall above about 400 metres. So something to bear in mind if you're travelling in that part of the world. Elsewhere, though, we should see another drier interlude with a few clear spells coming through from time to time, and now with some damp ground, potentially for some fog patches as well. But on the whole, it will not be as cold on Christmas Eve morning as it has been for some recent mornings. So certainly watch out for the fog first thing on Christmas Eve if you have travel plans. That could take a time to clear across central southern England, parts of eastern England too. Helped though by increasing amounts of cloud and a breeze from the west. So some heavy rain coming into parts of southwest England, Wales and Northern Ireland through Christmas Eve through the day. Elsewhere though, it should be mostly dry, and drier for Scotland certainly in the last couple of days. Drier but colder, we're still in the cold air here, mild air to the southwest. And the dividing line will be weather fronts. And it's along this dividing line we probably stand the greatest chance of seeing a little bit of snow through Christmas. So whilst a lot of places will be quite wet at times, quite unsettled, with some colder air to the north though, that's where your best chances of seeing some snow. Take care.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for the Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is the Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
You're watching GB News live across the UK, the world, and our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We're here for you. Don't forget to join our community by hitting the subscribe button.
And download the GB News app so you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you. Email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
Welcome back. 24 minutes past 7. You're watching The Great British Breakfast with Rosie Wright and Simon McCoy.
Now, amid a rise in Omicron cases and lower footfall, Chancellor Rishi Sunak announced a £1 million support package for hospitality. That was earlier in the week, and individual businesses are able to claim grants of up to £6,000 each. Many businesses around the country, though, are saying, and they've told us here on this programme, it is simply not enough to cover the losses they're facing, particularly in the run-up to Christmas. For many of those businesses, this week often gets them through the year.
Well, Alex Rathman is the former owner of 3 restaurants and a hospitality consultant. He joins us now. Alex, former owner of 3 restaurants, is that right?
True so, yes, got me.
And so what happened? Why former?
Oh, what with that? Well, to be honest, I wanted to concentrate on talking about the issues. I'll tell you why. I spent the whole day yesterday speaking to colleagues, former friends and current restaurateurs to try and understand what they wanted me to say today. And I think I've got some of the answers to the questions.
All right. So what is the move?
I'm not a current restaurateur. I wanted to canvass opinion and see what needed to be said.
And what do they want you to say?
Well, actually, and I've made some notes. The critical thing is what you asked about, the compensation offered by Rishi Sunak. That was the most salient point. Was immediately they felt quite literally insulted by this. Given the loss of revenue that they're suffering now with the announcements made by the government, it really doesn't touch the sides. And my experience over 15 years of having restaurants myself and 10 years working in them previously is that intuitively I know that's not enough. And it doesn't take into consideration a great many factors. Furthermore, I think what I would add is that the government first announced that they had a plan B about 3 months ago. And it appears that there's been no real consultation with the hospitality industry in this intervening period prior to enacting this sort of plan B and talking about these things to discover what would be necessary to help the hospitality industry. And I think that's the frustration point. And I wasn't a spokesperson for many years for the British Hospitality Association, which became UK Hospitality. And unfortunately, it is the classic refrain that the government either doesn't know how hospitality works or doesn't care. And I have to say, I support their point of view.
So if it's insulting, £6,000, the difficulty for the Chancellor is they can't just keep going to the bottom of his pockets and dishing things out indefinitely. What would be enough?
Well, I understand your point completely, and I did anticipate the question. I think, to be fair, the reason I used the word insulting is, and I watched his statement several times to make sure I understood it fully. I think the use of the word generous on several occasions. I also think that my former colleagues and these restaurateurs that I spoke to, of which I spoke to 5 yesterday, who have a variety of places in London. I must admit it's a London-centric sample, but I'm sure their sentiments are shared by most across the country. They said they're a little bit sick of finding out these things through the news and not being given really full information ahead of the game about how they might access these funds, so on and so forth. I suppose what I'm trying to say is, given 3 months sitting on Plan B, perhaps they might have drafted a letter they could send out to the owners of hospitality businesses laying out what could be done for them within those 3 months as part of Plan B. I mean, I think that's really what it's about. The insulting element is not just about the monetary amount. Sometimes it's not just what you say, it's how you say it.
But it is about the money, isn't it? And I'm just wondering if the furlough scheme, say, was it reintroduced, would that be seen as a positive sign?
Not if it's in conjunction with lockdown, which is how it was before. But also, I would point out something which appears to be quite frequently missed, yet again, by the government. And I was quite a fervent spokesperson on this topic. I had something called the Tipping Point campaign about fairness of distribution of tips and service charges. And I don't want to get too bogged down in this topic, but I should point out that when we have a loss of business for the restaurant, and we talk about, or I'm talking about food-centric businesses, 6,000 is offered, for example. The incidental money earned by the majority of the staff, because the majority of the staff who work in the hospitality industry, of which there are 3.2 million in Britain, 8% of our workforce, they benefit from tips and service charge. This has never been covered by furlough. In fact, it legally cannot be, because it's considered to be bonus earnings. It's actually considered legally to be a transfer directly between the client and the member of staff, not through the restaurant. As I said, I don't want to get too bogged down in it because I could talk forever about that topic. The point is that waiters, bartenders, and indeed chefs and receptionists and so on and so forth can benefit from service charge. It makes up a huge amount of their earnings, and it's never been covered by furlough. So, you know, there's another issue there with that, to be fair.
Can you give us an example of one of the people that you spoke to yesterday, what their business is like and how it's hurting?
Yes. OK, so my former number 2 of 3.5 years has a wonderful neighbourhood restaurant in Putney. I don't know if it's appropriate for me to promote the restaurant directly. I'd say it's about 30 in the bar and about 70 in the dining room. It's an independent restaurant. And within 3 days of Boris on the Friday, forgive me, I forget the date, but the Friday when he first made the announcements, the day after the party thing, they lost £30,000 worth of bookings within 72 hours by cancellation.
30,000. And then how long?
30,000 worth of revenue, yes. That was in cancellations within the first 72 hours. My another chap who used to work for me for several years, who's the general manager of a very famous Michelin star restaurant in London, they lost a couple of £100,000 worth of bookings.
How long can this go on?
Well, I don't know. I'm really reluctant to say something, but something that was said to me is, if you're going to do this to us, you might as well give us lockdown with some compensation. And please don't misunderstand me with this. This is the last thing that restaurateurs want. But to me, it almost feels like this is honestly, everybody has described this as almost worse than the lockdown, because as you have mentioned, lockdown did involve furlough. Rishi Sunak quite rightly pointed out that they had reduced VAT, but I'm sure you may well be aware that they reduced it to 5%, and that's gone up to 12.5% as of October. There's no sign of that going back down to 5% despite the loss of revenue. How long can it go on? I'm at a loss. And I think the uncertainty is the other thing. I think everybody agrees that uncertainty is the enemy of business, the enemy of industry. People don't want to invest. And I don't know, people are losing heart in terms of, putting up the fight and working all year to get to Christmas and try and make some money and build it up and do the marketing and prepare the menus and take the bookings and the pre-orders and so on and so forth. And then to have it taken away at the last minute. I'm only describing an emotional response. I'm just describing what it is for them because I feel that's my role in this. I'm not here to really say that I could do a better job than any of the politicians, but I have to put across their side. And of course, it's incredibly demoralising. And I would like to point out that it particularly is so for the staff. They've had to cut their hours, not because they're being horrible to the staff, because they don't have the trade. And as I said, it's 8% of our workforce that work directly in hospitality. Hospitality, because the pyramid, the structure of the hierarchy is incredibly waiter, chef, and bartender heavy, and therefore these are people who are not particularly high income, and they've just had and anybody who's an hourly rate has just lost pretty much all of their income before Christmas, and of course there's all of the suppliers, everything down the supply chain, everybody that relies on the money spent by the restaurants with their business. And so when you extend it out, maybe 10% of the UK workforce is going to be quite affected by this. And I don't know if people really realise that. And I think you have to separate the impact on the businesses themselves and the staff who are actually on the floor and behind the bar and cooking and understand that it has wider impacts. It's not just about helping the business survive. And as I mentioned earlier, the business can't prop up the service charge and the tips they would have received. So they're already, hamstrung to some extent. So, in fairness, if I have a moment to mention, we had something equally absurd but almost totally opposite last year when the government decided to announce the wrong date initially, if you remember. I think they announced December the 3rd, then it turned out to be the 2nd, that the restaurants could reopen for Christmas to enjoy the wonderful Christmas trade. Having completely missed the point that the Christmas trade tends to revolve around large parties. So with a great aplomb, the government announced in November last year, there you go, restaurateurs, within a week, you can open for Christmas and get your revenue in, but totally missed the point. I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they don't understand how the restaurant industry works, but in the length of my career, they've certainly had enough opportunity to find out they were so minded.
Yeah. Well, Alice, it's good of you to put forward the view of restaurateurs around the country, I'm sure, and those that you've spoken to specifically. But thank you very much for joining us this morning. Good to talk to you.
Now, a new campaign is being launched to raise awareness of how dangerous it is to put batteries in your rubbish or your general recycling bin. To find out more, our North East reporter, Rachel Sweeney, joins us live. Rachel, I think we know it's not very wise to do this, but explain to us, it can be really dangerous to put batteries in the bin.
Absolutely. They may be small, but they can be very dangerous. The danger is that if we put them in our household waste bins or our recycling bins, they can get damaged, they can get punctured or crushed during the processing. And if that happens, they can leak a very toxic liquid that can then set fire to any combustible materials anywhere near it. Now, if this happens, that can put the lives of waste disposal workers in really serious danger. It's really something that we need to think about. We've seen 300 of these incidents across England. Now, 19 of them have been in Sunderland, Gateshead and South Tyneside. One particular incident in Gateshead, I've got some pictures of that to show you, is where a battery caused a fire, and you can see just how far it actually spread. These types of fires are very difficult to extinguish. They are very challenging for our fire services, and they are detrimental to the environment as well. There was also an incident on the A1, which is our busiest road, where a waste disposal truck had to completely dump the load there. It was too unsafe to get back to any kind of plant, and the fire was dealt with, but the road was closed. It's our busiest road, and that caused a lot of disruption, also really damaged the environment too. Well, I've been speaking to Mark Morley from Gateshead Council, who tells us exactly what we should be doing.
all suppliers of batteries over 32 kilograms. So any big supermarket, big retailer will sell more than 32 kilograms of batteries per year. They have a duty to take back your old batteries. It's not totally advertised, but they do have a duty to that. So you can take them back to wherever you purchase your batteries from, as long as they have sold over that figure. So your key supermarkets, DIY stores will all sell over that weight. So we'd encourage people to take them back and recycle them that way. Also, you can take them to local household waste recycling centres operated by local authorities. And also, as a council in Gateshead, we do have most of our key public buildings that will have collection points for batteries. So there are numerous places where you can take them and recycle them.
Yes, well, I've got you one example. It is my son's bin truck, which I thought was quite apt. It's broken. You can see where I've tried to fix it with some blue tack, but this is the sort of thing that I would chuck in the recycling bin without thinking there are batteries in there. Oop, I've just set the alarm off, and they could be very dangerous. Do check on the council websites for more information.
That's gone well. I'm one of those myself. Thank you, Rachel. We'll talk to you later.
Thanks very much. Now, coming up here, the Labour Party is demanding urgent action from the government to stop what it calls the demise of the theatre sector. After the break, we'll be speaking to Lucy Powell, the Shadow Culture Secretary. Don't miss it.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
It's 20 minutes to 8. Welcome back to the Great British Breakfast with Simon and me, Rosie.
Now, the number of pubs closing their doors in England and Wales has largely flatlined as in line with pre-pandemic levels. New analysis shows that more than 400 pubs have shut this year, and although that may sound grim, it's lower than the 2019 pre-pandemic closure figure. However, fears remain that the phasing out of financial support in the last few months, plus the Christmas cancellations in the wake of the Omicron variant, may lead to many closures in the future.
Michael Kill is the CEO of the Nighttime Industries. Michael, thank you very much for joining us again. We were just hearing about what's happening to restaurants, but talk to us about nightlife. It seems as though, actually, this sector may have been fairly resilient. It has clung on to be about comparable to what we would have seen in 2019.
Yeah, I mean, look, the figures coming out are almost a level of stasis. I think the challenge that we have with oncoming challenges around things like rent debt and rent being due, and also VAT being due early January, we are going to see a lot of these businesses really struggle, given the fact that we still have so much uncertainty around post-Christmas, Boxing Day and New Year's Eve, which are sort of critical trading periods for us. As you can understand, this morning we are faced with some positive news about the Omicron variant and its impact, but we still need a very clear message from government on what they are looking to do, and many of the businesses are holding fire to get that certainty so that they can understand what they're doing and communicate to their customers and their staff.
So these figures would seem to suggest that Boris Johnson has probably got it about right in terms of just waiting and seeing how this particular variant plays out.
Well, comparative to what Northern Ireland, Wales and Scotland, I mean, without a doubt, it's a better position for us. As you can appreciate, the anticipation, the anxiety of waiting has been really challenging for the industry, and a lot of people not understanding exactly what the Prime Minister and Cabinet Office are looking at are, concerned which direction things are going and that waiting. But if it means that we're going to have a positive outcome and we're going to be able to have Boxing Day and New Year's Eve out, then yes, that would be a very good point to suggest that Mr. Johnson has played a card here that could be beneficial to our industry.
Still, it is difficult to plan and prepare. What are businesses in England who haven't had any kind of guidance really about what life might look like even on New Year's Eve? What do they do? What decisions are they making this week?
Well, they've had to make decisions under the premise that things are moving forward. Many people are still sort of promoting and pushing on because they've got to go forward with what they know, and this is where the challenge lies. I mean, the news this morning, great, but many people have ordered the stock. They're starting to prepare their staff. The expectation is things are going to move forward. The challenge we have is with the news from Northern Ireland, Wales and Scotland. That's levied some concern right the way across the sector for England. But as we know very clearly, the PM is not adverse to going a different direction. So, we're hoping that he's going to give us our New Year's Eve back and give us the opportunity to trade. But I think the next sort of 4 or 5 days are going to be quite critical in terms of the data coming in and those decisions being made. And we're all at the behest of the next press conference from Cabinet Office, the Prime Minister and the scientific and medical advisors.
Well, we'll be looking at that very shortly. But Michael, for now, thank you very much for joining us, and a happy Christmas. This is our last chance to say happy Christmas to you.
Merry Christmas, and hopefully have a fantastic New Year as well, both of you. Thank you.
Let's all keep our fingers crossed for everybody on that basis. Yeah, thanks, Michael.
Michael, thanks. Now, it's 7:45. Labour has demanded urgent action from the government to prevent the demise of the theatre sector. They're calling on the government to support the arts sector, including widening eligibility for the Culture Recovery Fund, warning many treasured theatres face collapse without support. The call on the government follows an announcement from the Chancellor Rishi Sunak earlier this week that £30 million has been added to the fund. However, Labour says more needs to be done to ensure the support is effective and reaches those most in need.
Well, MP Lucy Powell is Shadow Culture Secretary and joins us now. Lucy, good morning to you.
Good morning.
So what specifically do you want the government to do?
Well, we want them to do 3 things. Firstly, to widen the eligibility of this culture emergency fund that they've set up, because at the moment it's not going to reach people that need it most. People who've already drawn down funds from that in previous waves, theatres and so on, won't be able to do that at the moment this time around. It's also not open to freelancers and individuals, which it is in other parts of the UK. And so that's leaving freelancers really on the scrap heap at this time of year. We also want them to speed it up. It's been very slow and cumbersome, and that's not really getting the support as quickly as it's needed. And thirdly, we want them to have an urgent review of the insurance scheme that they set up to support the live event sector, because it's just simply not working. It's not fit for purpose. It's very expensive. It's only covering live events in the event of a national lockdown. So all the theatre cancellations that we've been hearing about over recent days, they can't get covered by the government's insurance scheme, and there's no commercial insurance out there for them. So I think with these 3 actions, we could see many of our well-loved theatres and many of our orchestras and those that have all been affected by the collapse in confidence over recent weeks, and the freelancers, crucially, that work in this sector, having a better Christmas and being better protected.
The collapse in confidence is because people are scared to go out because they don't want to catch Omicron, because they want to spend Christmas with their families. And one of the things that's halted a lot of these productions going ahead is just simply that members of staff have got the virus and therefore they don't have the crew and the cast to put on a show. The government have changed the isolation period from 10 days to 7. They have announced some funding. What more could they really have done this week to try and prevent things like closures that we're seeing in this week here?
Well, as you say, you're right to say it's not just a case of fall off in demand, which has been huge, but it's not simply that. Many of the theatre productions and live events across the country, not just the West End, where over half the shows have had to be cancelled, but also up here in Manchester, in Liverpool, in other parts of the country, shows have had to be cancelled because of staff illness. And as they say, had the government's insurance scheme, a very expensive scheme that it set up many months ago for the live event sector, had that covered all aspects of potential sort of COVID interruption, not just the eventuality of a national lockdown, and many of these productions could have found themselves covered by insurance, which is what you would expect if a theatre show has to be cancelled due to an outbreak of a virus across the crew. Then you would expect it to be covered by insurance, but it's not. So the government could have done this months ago. It absolutely needs to do it very, very quickly. And it also, as I say, needs to make sure, I mean, it's not a huge amount of money, this £30 million pot that they put in, but they need to ensure that very quickly that gets to our treasured institutions, our theatres, our orchestras, our music venues, right across the country, gets to them quickly and is open to individuals, so that freelancers for whom Christmas is often their boomtown of year, you can also access these funds as well.
Yeah. Lucy, I mean, good news is thin on the ground at the moment, but the headlines this morning suggesting that the risk of a hospital stay with Omicron is 40% lower than with the other variants. That is good news and would suggest perhaps that the Prime Minister's stance of let's just wait and see is the right one. Where Labour has been pushing for more measures to be introduced, it would appear that perhaps he's got it right this time.
Well, look, it is very good news, and we're all closely following these data points, aren't we? Very, very closely. And yeah, I would say it is a fine judgment. I don't think we've been calling for more measures. What we've been calling for is more clarity, so that people know what the data points are and when that information might start to become available and what actions would follow or wouldn't follow. I don't think that's beyond the realms of what people can expect. So businesses who are trying to plan for a very busy New Year period, for example, people who are planning on travelling, the travel industry, people who've got plans to see family and friends. I don't think it's beyond the realms of the government to be able to say, these are the sorts of data points, these are the kind of criteria that we're looking at that change this very finely balanced situation. And I agree, it is a finely balanced situation that will change it one way or the other. And these are the times that we're going to review that, and these are the consequences that would flow. A bit like last year when we had the roadmap. You remember the roadmap coming out. We had dates, we had criteria, we knew what potentially was coming when. And obviously this is a faster moving situation, but you could have a faster timetable if necessary. But at the moment, it's just a sort of stab in the dark, isn't it? And I think that the fear is that the Prime Minister has sort of lost his authority to be able to take the country with him on such a plan. And I mean, he can't actually take his own backbenchers with him either. So that's the issue, really.
You just hinted at there, Lucy, this is a far faster moving situation. A month ago, we hadn't heard of Omicron. If anything, if Boris Johnson put in restrictions now for the new year, he could have done that at the beginning of this week. By now, Thursday, it could look like they weren't necessary. There is a case to say, let's just wait and not hurt businesses more than some restrictions could.
I think there is that. Obviously, there is that case. But what I would like to know, what we don't have as an official opposition and what the public don't have either, is what are all of those data points, not just from a public health point of view. So what kind of level of hospitalisations would be a cause of concern? What kind of hospitalisations of those who are vaccinated as opposed to unvaccinated? Data that we don't have access to. What kind of data point do we need to have about the severity of Omicron and so on versus Delta? What kind of level of infections? What are the range of data points that the government is looking at, as well as the economic impacts, as well as the mental health impacts and all of those things? What is it that they're going to make their assessment based on? I don't think that's a difficult question to ask them, so that then we're all clear as well about what these decisions are being based on, rather than just a kind of, it's just a feeling, we've had a kind of political discussion and I'm not sure I can take my cabinet with me or not. I think that's the fear, that this is it's in that realm rather than in a realm of here are a range of issues that we're looking at, and here's what we need to see in order for us not to go into further restrictions, or here's what we need to see that unfortunately will mean further restrictions, and what would those restrictions be and when might they come in.
Lucy, it's good to see you this morning. Just time to say have a Merry Christmas.
And to you and to all your viewers.
Thanks. Lucy Pell, good to see you. Thank you.
Now, coming up, COVID restrictions mean that some sports events are limited across Scotland, but skiing is thriving. I didn't act out skiing.
No, you're very... What's the word? Yes. You use your hands a lot. Here's the weather.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello, good morning. Well, the weather's a good bit more unsettled now for the next few days. We've got some rain moving its way northeastwards across the UK today. Still some snow likely across northern Scotland tonight, but milder towards the southwest. And you can see we've got low pressure dominating the North Atlantic now, and this is going to be pushing in a selection of weather fronts from time to time over the next few days. Wednesday's weather fronts tended to fizzle out, but only to be replaced by the next set coming in from the southwest. So still the remnants of Wednesday's rain across central and northern Scotland, perhaps a bit of hill snow too. Elsewhere, though, a drier, perhaps briefly brighter interlude for eastern England, but otherwise we've got the next band of rain coming in from the southwest. Not too much across England and Wales, but for northern England, parts of Northern Ireland, certainly for Scotland, ended up being another quite wet day with quite persistent rain across Scotland and some hill snow developing on the northern edge of this front over the mountains. Cold in the north, but still quite mild actually in the south, temperatures well into double figures. And then a wet night to come across parts of Scotland in particular, with potential for quite significant snowfall above about 400 metres. So something to bear in mind if you're travelling in that part of the world. Elsewhere, though, we should see another drier interlude with a few clear spells coming through from time to time, and now with some damp ground, potentially for some fog patches as well. But on the whole, it will not be as cold on Christmas Eve morning as it has been for some recent mornings. So certainly watch out for the fog first thing on Christmas Eve if you have travel plans. That could take a time to clear across central southern England, parts of eastern England too. Helped though by increasing amounts of cloud and a breeze from the west. So some heavy rain coming into parts of southwest England, Wales and Northern Ireland through Christmas Eve through the day. Elsewhere though, it should be mostly dry, and drier for Scotland certainly in the last couple of days. Drier but colder, we're still in the cold air here, mild air to the southwest. And the dividing line will be weather fronts. And it's along this dividing line we probably stand the greatest chance of seeing a little bit of snow through Christmas. So whilst a lot of places will be quite wet at times, quite unsettled, with some colder air to the north though, that's where your best chances of seeing some snow. Take care.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Welcome back. You're watching the Great British Breakfast. It's 3 minutes to 8. Now, COVID restrictions mean that some sports are limited across Scotland, but one is thriving. Skiers and ski boarders are flocking to the Cairngorms to enjoy the snow and the outdoors, as our Scotland reporter David Donaldson reports.
It's a long, winding climb up to the highest ski resort in the Cairngorms. On the 8-mile trek from Aviemore, you'll pass stunning scenery and tourist attractions such as Loch Morlich, reindeer and much more. And this year, those at the ski resort are hoping for a good season with plenty of snow.
This year, we don't know if, with the pandemic, the variations, the changes, are people going abroad, are they cancelling their holidays? We expect to be very busy over Christmas and New Year. The challenge will be having enough snow to manage people's expectations. So there might be a period we might have to restrict numbers on the mountain compared to much snow we've got, but keep an eye on the forecast, we play it by ear and hopefully accommodate as many as we can safely, but also keep in our mind that a lot of people want to come here to ski and we need more natural snow to get more of the mountain open.
There are 32 kilometres of slopes and 35 different runs within the ski area. The Cairngorms National Park is home to 3 of Scotland's 5 ski centres, which attracts visitors from far and wide.
Very different from the Alps, in as much as this is very rolling, gentle scenery. But it's beautiful, and yes, it is impressive. I didn't expect it to be as high. That sounds a bit silly.
A new snow factory at the Cairngorm Mountain provides skiing for all levels of experience. It will also help provide access from the lower slopes to the mid-station for the upper lifts.
The Techno-Alpine Snow Factory there produces snow at any temperature, so it's been on for the last month, pumping out big mounds of snow, and our piece machines will smooth all that out before opening day to create a beginner area for ski schools and beginners. So if that's all we've got for the opening day, we'll probably reach our numbers quite quickly, so we just have to hope for more natural snow to come so we get more skiing available. This summer actually we've been very busy. We have a kids play park down here we open in the summer with a tubing slide and a little zip slide. That's been exceptionally busy. Many people come to see that and spend in the cafes and restaurants, so we've had a good busy summer. So hopefully we can continue that through the winter.
The summer was clearly a huge success, and it's hopeful this will continue throughout the season.
We'll have more in just a moment. And here it is, just a moment later. It's 8 o'clock. Good morning. It's Thursday, the 23rd of December. These are the stories that matter to you and to us on the Great British Breakfast with me, Simon McCoy, and Rosie Wright.
And it's my last day before I go on holiday. Well, moving on, recent studies show Omicron is milder, vindicating Prime Minister Boris Johnson's decision to hold fire on imposing new curbs. But the studies come as daily COVID cases topped 100,000 for the first time. So with this new data offering some hope, what do you think the government should do? Let us know. GBViews at gbnews.uk.
Britain is reportedly considering the rollout of a 4th jab after both Israel and Germany gave the green light to a second set of boosters. But will you accept that?
Government vaccine advisors say vulnerable primary school children should be offered a low-dose COVID vaccine. But should we be vaccinating children as young as 5 years old?
Millions will face travel chaos over Christmas and the New Year thanks to rail strikes, airport disruption and the busiest roads in years. Well, will you be going somewhere for the holiday or are you just going to stay put?
39 places are competing to win city status as part of the Queen's Platinum Jubilee celebrations. And for the first time, towns in British overseas territories are competing.
I mean, you're right.
Yes, I'm fine.
Very good. Now, 2 early studies suggest that people infected with the Omicron strain of COVID are less likely to need hospital treatment. Imperial College, which led one of the studies, found people with the variant are up to 45% less likely to stay in hospital than those with Delta. But research coming out of Scotland warns that the mild nature of Omicron may be offset by its high transmissibility.
Well, that comes as the daily number of COVID-19 cases hit more than 100,000 for the first time in the UK. Chris Smith is a consultant virologist and presenter of the Naked Scientist podcast. Chris, thank you very much for speaking to us. This seems like Boris Johnson, Chris Whitty, they kept saying, let's wait for the data. Research has been done and it is looking more positive than perhaps feared.
We'll come back in just a moment. Have we got Chris Smith? No.
They don't.
So we'll talk to him very shortly. But just to get your response to what we've been talking about this morning, and a lot of you making the point that Boris Johnson does seem to have made the right call and that Scotland and Wales seem to have jumped the gun in imposing restrictions, that with this new information, the front page of The Guardian says risk of hospital stay is 40% lower with this variant, would suggest that perhaps the Prime Minister was right to hold fire on bringing in restrictions.
I believe Chris does join us now. Chris, thank you very much. That was a surprise. You're so famous for your background. Just thinking, doesn't look quite right. So, Chris, early signs of optimism. We were told to wait for the data. We've analysed some of it, and it looks better than we expected.
Yeah, that's right. So when we first sort of launched down this route about a month ago with the discovery of this Omicron variant from Southern Africa, there was some evidence that this was translating into a more mild condition. The patients who were presenting with it had milder symptoms. The people who were going to hospital were doing so with a lower rate than people who were catching the Delta agent. When they were in hospital, they were staying less long. When they were in hospital, they were needing less oxygen. Fewer of them were ending up in intensive care. So there was a suggestion that that might be the case. But of course, people cautiously said, we've got to be very careful about translating the results from one geography, one demography, to a very different country with very different vaccination rates. So it is welcome news to see this initial data, small numbers so far, so one must again be cautious about interpretation, but it's welcome to see evidence that people who are catching this virus in this country do indeed seem to, with a much lower rate, maybe 2/3 of the time fewer, be getting severe disease compared to people who are catching the pre-existing dominant Delta variant.
I mean, this isn't going to lower the number of people who are unable to go to work because they've tested positive, but what it does mean is that the NHS, which, let's face it, from day one, this has been about easing pressure on the NHS, this would suggest that we're not quite in the mess that some were predicting just a few days ago.
Well, the models that were presented to the government to galvanise action and lead to some of the changes that we've seen being introduced were worst case scenarios that also made the assumption that the Omicron agent would be as bad clinically as the Delta agent. They'll be able to refine those models down now, so therefore the anticipated pressure on the NHS can be revised down. And yes, you're right, that actually if people have got the infection, they won't be able to go to work, and that still remains a challenge, but they'll be facing one or a slightly lower level of challenge from people trying to deal with the health problems in the hospital caused by this variant, if indeed these data are correct and we are seeing a reduction in the severity of the illness when people do catch it.
A couple of other developments just in the last 24 hours. The first is the approval of the Pfizer jab for children aged 5 to 11, and it's going to be offered, at least initially, just to those children at risk. Do you think that's a wise move?
Well, what's happened is that the MHRA, they're the Medicines and Healthcare Regulatory Products Agency, they have said that we judge the Pfizer vaccine to be safe for this age group. And then the JCVI, the Joint Committee on Vaccination and Immunisation, have said we give approval for its use in children of that age who are extremely clinically vulnerable. So it basically extends the age range that we can administer this to under appropriate guidance from where we'd got to before, which was about age 11, down to the 5-year-olds. This is not the same as saying everybody age 5 and above is now eligible for vaccination. They are limiting the guidance to those who are extremely clinically vulnerable. These will be children who have underlying diseases, genetic problems, things like severe asthma. That means that were they to catch coronavirus, it could be a severe illness for them. And this is one safeguard against that. But it's not the same as saying at this stage that now we're going to extend the repertoire of vaccination to these younger age groups. I don't think that that has been decided yet.
Chris, given that we have got this positive news this morning, and given that just a few weeks ago when we first heard about Omicron, everybody was saying, look, we need to wait a few weeks. If we're entering a period where we're saying it is not as bad as feared, this may mean that New Year could be normal.
Well, the real quandary that the politicians and policymakers have faced is, are we going too far versus are we not going far enough? Because all they were confronted by at the start of all this was very rapidly escalating numbers. And we know that there's a delay between people catching the infection and catching it badly enough that they then need to seek, escalating care input. The other point is that probably at the beginnings of outbreaks like this, it tends to mainly dwell in younger people who are at work, at university, at school, on public transport, in the office and so on, well-networked people. And those are the people who are on average younger and probably at lower risk. So one has to be cautious about saying there are cases, no consequences, nothing to see here, we're all fine. So for that reason, they would have found it very, very difficult to say, we need to do X, Y, and Z, which is why, and I think it's going to turn out to be the right decision, they have put in place some measures that have probably curtailed the spread, as has public behaviour, and review on Christmas Day or Boxing Day, see how those numbers are panning out, and then decide whether or not it's necessary and proportionate to go further, or whether actually this thing will take care of itself. We're all hoping it's going to be more of the latter and less of the former.
To ask a very optimistic question about the latter, could we see a situation, as someone suggested earlier on this programme, that we abandon the idea of the isolation period? It's gone down from 10 days to 7. Could you ever see that happening?
Well, the mainstay of public health and how we break the chain of transmission is by removing from the equation actively infected cases. This virus has been very difficult to control because it has a significant proportion of people who have no symptoms whatsoever. So actually, if you've identified a case and each case creates 2 or 3 more cases, and with this Omicron variant maybe as many as 5 new cases, you're going to remove a lot of cases from the population if you isolate people. So I don't think we're going to see a situation where people would say, well, just don't isolate anymore, at least not in the near term. When we get to a stage that we're much more comfortable with controlling the infection, and those days are coming, they'll come with better vaccines. People are already working on vaccine 2.0, enhanced versions of the vaccines that can deal with not just the variants we know about, but the ones we haven't even discovered yet. That's coming. That's being worked on. We've also got drugs that we can begin to throw at the problem now and intervene very meaningfully in people who are severely unwell. So I think there is a day coming when we will regard this as much more like the common cold. But for now, I can't see us abandoning what is our mainstay of public health control, which is keeping people out of the equation once we know they are an infected case. What we might see in the nearer term, though, is more refinement around who is infectious when, as we get better tests so that they really are a proper marker and a trustworthy marker of infectivity, we might be able to slim down that isolation period a bit more than the 7 days that we've now introduced, but it's early days.
Quickly, we seem to be hearing less and less about long COVID, which hasn't gone away. Are we nearer understanding what on earth it is?
Well, long COVID is almost certainly an umbrella term that describes a whole raft of different syndromes. Some of them will be because of destruction of our airways and damage caused by the acute infection with the virus. Others will be knock-on consequences to the immune system and other organs in the body caused by the infection. But everybody is different, and therefore different people will respond to the infection differently. And what they're united by are these common constellation of symptoms that we're dubbing long COVID. But there's a range of different routes to get to this. And probably, if we were to look at many other infectious diseases like the flu, glandular fever, chickenpox, many of them have a post-infectious syndrome where people do feel a bit run down and a bit low afterwards. And it may just be we've noticed with coronavirus this happens because we've had so many cases all at once. We think that perhaps 1 in 7 people, certainly 1 in 7 younger people, may have post-infectious syndromes after coronavirus. But most people, as far as we can tell, do recover, do bounce back, and most do get better. That's not to say that there aren't some people who are quite severely impacted, and it's important we follow up on those people to find out why they've been so severely impacted and what we can do about it. But thankfully, those people are in the minority. Most people do make a complete and full recovery.
Chris, it's always good to talk to you, and particularly now, just before Christmas, we wish you a happy Christmas, because I don't think we're going to be talking again before then. And, well, let's all hope that there's better news to come in the new year and that you'll be bringing it to us.
Indeed.
Chris, thanks very much.
Merry Christmas.
And to you, thank you.
Now it's 11 minutes past 8. Let's give you an overview of what else is happening today. And changes in Wales and Northern Ireland. Both are bringing in a series of new COVID restrictions that come into force from Boxing Day. In Wales, the 2-metre social distancing rule returns to workplaces and in public venues. They're also bringing back the rule of 6. That will be a limit on the number of people allowed to attend events as well. And in Northern Ireland, nightclubs are going to close. People will be urged, but not mandated, to stick to 3 households indoors.
Spain's Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez has announced plans for mandatory face coverings outside in response to a dramatic rise in COVID-19 infections there. It comes as the Omicron variant continues to spread across Europe fast, with the World Health Organization declaring the region once again at the epicenter of the pandemic. The mask measure will be put to ministers and signed into law before Christmas.
Ghislaine Maxwell will spend Christmas and her 60th birthday in limbo and in prison after a jury failed to reach a verdict in her sex trafficking case. The jury deliberated for their 3rd day. They sent 1 note requesting 3 transcripts, but they didn't come to a decision. So the court will break for the rest of the week and will come back on Monday. Maxwell will spend then Christmas Day behind bars at the Metropolitan Detention Centre.
Sally Ann Howes has died at the age of 91. The Tony Award-nominated actress first appeared on screen when she was just 12. She enjoyed a career that spanned 6 decades. Best known, of course, for playing the role of Truly Scrumptious in the 1968 musical film Chitty Chitty Bang Bang.
A little bit of sports news for you. Arsenal will face Liverpool in the semi-finals of the Carabao Cup, while Chelsea will take on Tottenham. Both semi-finals are scheduled to take place over 2 legs, the first being played in the first week of January. The deciding leg will take place the following week, with the final at Wembley on February the 27th.
The capitals of the Falkland Islands, Cayman Islands and Gibraltar are among 39 places vying to win official UK city status in a new competition. The first-time applicants join regular contenders for the title in a contest held to mark the Queen's 70th year reign. It's the first time towns in British overseas territories and Crown dependencies have been able to apply. Winners will be announced in June.
Let's have a quick look at the weather. Today's going to remain largely dull, with a band of rain sweeping across the west and the north, this falling heavy in the afternoon. The southern parts of the east will stay drier, and it's a mild day for many.
Government advisors on vaccines have said that vulnerable primary school children, those aged between 5 and 11, should be offered a low-dose COVID vaccine. The lower dose has just been approved for use in the UK after being deemed safe and effective. However, a decision on vaccinating all 5 to 11-year-olds has not yet been made.
Angus Salish is an oncologist at St George's University, London. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you very much. I think this is going to be highly controversial for some people. Explain to us why it is that 5-year-olds, children as young as that, should or could get the vaccine.
Well, I think you've explained it very well. It is for children who have exceptional vulnerabilities, and that's the decision, as I understand it, has been made. It has not been made for all children from around the ages of 5. It's for those with very serious conditions, and it was very well discussed by Chris Smith earlier on in the piece.
What advice? This is every household in the UK. There are parents worried about whether they should or shouldn't. Given the news this morning, for the first time, is positive that we may be at a point where Omicron is not as bad as was first feared, a lot of parents are on the side of caution and say, "Look, I'd rather not," aren't they?
Well, I stress that these are for very vulnerable children, and I have been a signatory with a lot of colleagues, been senior, very experienced colleagues. I'm not a paediatrician. That means I don't treat children anybody under the age of 18. And we've been very concerned about pan-vaccinating people of this age, with a virus which is not very dangerous to children compared to ordinary colds and flu. So I have signed and have great reservations about implementing this for everybody. The reason for this is that children have a very vigorous and evolving immune response. They've got very, very good T cells and memory cells in which they are remembering all the interactions that they have with various pathogens and making very good immune responses to them. And you really only need to boost those if there is some problem in the fact that they have an abnormal immune system. For the vast majority of people, I personally do not think we need to vaccinate children with this type of pathogen. And it is incredibly good news today that the trend that I think we have to give a lot of credit to Dr. Coetzee from South Africa, that she picked up that this was more infectious, but it was actually less pathogenic, less likely to cause infections, that this appears to be the way it is going in the population. And I think that this is very, very good news. And I have stressed that when you have an agent that's getting very, very infectious, but getting less pathogenic, that I think this is overall very good news, because we already know that about 90% plus in some surveys of people have evidence of exposure to COVID, either through vaccination or being infected, or both, which is an incredibly high background resistance now. And so the Omicron, as it's called, is only going to cause a much milder disease. And I believe the quicker that dissipates through the population, we just protect those who are really vulnerable, the quicker we'll see an end to this whole pandemic, and the quicker we can get back to normal.
What do you make of the argument that we often hear that you should vaccinate children because they could then pass it on to their grandparents, their parents?
Oh, yes. I've heard this argument many, many times. In fact, it's always the challenge that I get if you say, why do you need to do children? And people say, well, you have to do the children because they're going to pass it on to their parents and their grandparents. But my argument is, but their parents and their grandparents have been vaccinated. So why do you need to vaccinate the children? And we already know that the vaccination doesn't necessarily make you totally immune to infection, and it doesn't necessarily prevent you passing it on. So people who have been vaccinated and are very young, robust immune systems, often they get infected and can pass it on, and they don't even know. So why would you vaccinate somebody when it doesn't actually prevent them passing it on to somebody who's already vaccinated? So that's what I would argue. I just don't buy that argument at all. It's up to the people who are at risk, the parents, the grandparents, to have been fully vaccinated. The children are going to come across a lot of other bugs and everything they have to deal with in their lives, so their immune system completely evolves. And of course, this is assisted with other vaccinations against very dangerous pathogens, which we know work supremely well. And those are the ones that they really must have. But as I reiterate, I do have doubts about pushing a vaccine that is for something that is not going to kill them and is not really going to prevent them passing it on.
A lot of people watching this morning are going to go, at last, a voice of calm. Common sense seems to be creeping in. And you mentioned the doctor in South Africa who first discovered Omicron, who said this appears to be mild. And then this country went into absolute overdrive, suggesting that this was going to be horrendous, that the effects were going to be so damaging. We've had Wales and Scotland already announcing that they're introducing these draconian measures in the new year. And then we've got now evidence that perhaps we've overreacted completely to this new variant.
Without doubt, and I have been singing from the sidelines, as it were, that I was rather horrified at the overreactions. And have we learnt nothing from the overreacting? It is very easy to deal as a public health person or a virologist with a virus and how infectious it is and the damage it does, and say that you lock down, you prevent everybody from being infected. without understanding the knock-on effect of that. That's one of the reasons I got involved with this whole pandemic so much, because I was one of the first to scream, what about my cancer patients? I mean, you're looking at the whole health service just to look at the infectability of a virus, which at the end of the day is not killing nearly as many people as the cancer is killing in the cancer clinic if you do not do the normal diagnosis, treatment, etc. If you delay those things, the build-up of more advanced cancer and death is inevitable. You cannot deal with everything in isolation, and this is what I have been really shouting about. You cannot drop the management of everything else for something that at the end of the day, it is not as big as killer as we thought, and we mustn't get things out of proportion. And we now do have the vaccines, and we have a range of new drugs coming through that if you do get ill, the doctors are much better at getting you through a danger point without having to go to hospital or intensive care, etc. So we really must build on the positive aspects that we've learned from this pandemic and not panic every time there's a new variant. And there will be new variants. But we predicted that if everything goes to plan, the variants will become more infectious and they'll become less dangerous. And it really looks like this is now following that pattern. And I, for one, I was terribly impressed by Dr. Coetzee and not very impressed with our peers here and the way they reacted to her. It was full of what does she know? She's in South Africa. I know we have much more experience over here. I thought it was quite embarrassing, actually, because I believed her. She was a frontline GP. She said, I am seeing these patients. They're not nearly as ill as with the Delta variant. And I thought that was a fantastic, reassuring thing, which so many people just wanted to put down and say, oh, but it's different over there. It's a different population environment. It won't apply to us. So I think it's about time we have to mature at the way we listen to the information, especially if it's quite good news. And I think we've got to learn to start coping with news that's going to slowly get better.
My word, doesn't it make a change? Agnes Dalgleish, it's really good to talk to you. Thank you very much. And Merry Christmas to you too. Thank you.
Now, it is at 24 minutes past 8. We've just heard about sort of the practicalities of vaccinating children. But what about the sort of emotional, psychological side of things? We're going to be speaking to Lucy Bereford, psychotherapist and broadcaster, after this.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello, good morning. Well, the weather's a good bit more unsettled now for the next few days. We've got some rain moving its way northeastwards across the UK today. Still some snow likely across northern Scotland tonight, but milder towards the southwest. And you can see we've got low pressure dominating the North Atlantic now, and this is going to be pushing in a selection of weather fronts from time to time over the next few days. Wednesday's weather fronts tended to fizzle out, but only to be replaced by the next set coming in from the southwest. So still the remnants of Wednesday's rain across central and northern Scotland, perhaps a bit of hill snow too. Elsewhere, though, a drier, perhaps briefly brighter interlude for eastern England, but otherwise we've got the next band of rain coming in from the southwest. Not too much across England and Wales, but for northern England, parts of Northern Ireland, certainly for Scotland, ended up being another quite wet day with quite persistent rain across Scotland and some hill snow developing on the northern edge of this front over the mountains. Cold in the north, but still quite mild actually in the south, temperatures well into double figures. And then a wet night to come across parts of Scotland in particular, with potential for quite significant snowfall above about 400 metres. So something to bear in mind if you're travelling in that part of the world. Elsewhere, though, we should see another drier interlude with a few clear spells coming through from time to time, and now with some damp ground, potentially for some fog patches as well. But on the whole, it will not be as cold on Christmas Eve morning as it has been for some recent mornings. So certainly watch out for the fog first thing on Christmas Eve if you have travel plans. That could take a time to clear across central southern England, parts of eastern England too. Helped though by increasing amounts of cloud and a breeze from the west. So some heavy rain coming into parts of southwest England, Wales and Northern Ireland through Christmas Eve through the day. Elsewhere though it should be mostly dry, and drier for Scotland certainly in the last couple of days. Drier but colder, we're still in the cold air here, mild air to the southwest. and the dividing line will be weather fronts. And it's along this dividing line we probably stand the greatest chance of seeing a little bit of snow through Christmas. So whilst a lot of places will be quite wet at times, quite unsettled, with some colder air to the north, though, that's where your best chances of seeing some snow. Take care.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for the Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is the Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
You're watching GB News live across the UK, the world, and our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We're here for you. Don't forget to join our community by hitting the subscribe button.
And download the GB News app so you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you. Email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
It's 8:30. Welcome back to the Great British Breakfast with Simon McCoy and me, Rosie Wright.
Now, government advisors on vaccines have said that vulnerable primary school children, those aged between 5 and 11, should be offered a low-dose COVID vaccine. The lower dose has just been approved for use in the UK after being deemed safe and effective. However, a decision on vaccinating all 5 to 11-year-olds has not yet been made.
Lucy Beresford is a psychotherapist and broadcaster. Lucy, thank you very much for joining us. Is it the right call, necessary? The medical professionals obviously think we'll approve it for those at risk, those vulnerable children from age 5 upwards.
Well, from a medical perspective, I'm not a clinician, I'm not a paediatrician, but I think what a lot of people are grappling with is that age-old psychological problem of should I do something or should I not do it? And decision-making is a really important psychological process. We've seen that in a way writ large with the cabinet, with the government, as to what decision to take. And what we do know is that the scientists have put a lot of effort into, first of all, making sure that the vaccine is safe, and secondly, peer reviewing material and data to ensure that the decision that they've come to makes perfect sense. We've seen analogous behaviour in other countries where they have offered vaccines to younger children, perhaps even far quicker than that has happened in this country. And therefore, what needs to happen now is that this information has come out, and it's now down to parents really to make that decision for their children. At the moment, it's for clinically vulnerable children. And I thought your previous guest, Angus Dalgleish, had some really interesting points to make about that. But in terms of weighing up that decision, parents are going to have to use scientific information, but also their own emotional response to the situation. That's what makes it so complicated.
And particularly this morning, because if you look at the headlines this morning, it's positive. You know, risk of hospital stay 40% less than with the Omicron variant than with the Delta variant. The first bit of positive news, and yet we've already had Wales, Scotland announcing these tough measures in January. But what's the psychological effect on, particularly on youngsters, when, frankly, we've had nothing but doom for the last couple of weeks, which may have just, the scientists may have just got it wrong. They maybe should have listened to what we were hearing in South Africa in the first place.
Well, certainly Dr. Coetzee from South Africa had some very valid points to make, particularly about the impact of Omicron on her population in South Africa. The trouble with a very big issue like a pandemic is that there are lots of competing pieces of information, and ultimately you have to make choices for yourself, and that's what causes the stress. Now, our bodies, first of all, our brains are very hardwired to make decisions about things in the very near future. Is this a saber-toothed tiger in front of me? Should I kill it or should I run away? So our brains really work on that. What we're less good at are trying to make decisions about things that are going to happen in the future, even if that's in the very near future, which is why I should imagine there was so much paralysis within the government about making a decision in 3 or 4 or 7 days' time. Now, the physical effect of that stress, not just for children, but for grown-ups as well, is if you've got all of that stress hormone, a lot of cortisol sloshing around your body, trying to work out whether to fight or flight. Your body is designed for that to happen, but not routinely. And you could argue that that's been happening for a lot of us now for months and now nearly 2 years on end. And our bodies are just simply not designed to cope with that level of stress this continuously, which is why one of the things I was very supportive of your previous guest, Angus Dalgleish, was his concern for his cancer patients. I'm terribly concerned about the mental health, not just of the grown-ups, but in particular for the children too, because the mental health impact of COVID is probably going to be the biggest legacy of this pandemic.
What advice do you have for parents who still this week were feeling, am I going to be able to spend Christmas with my children, whether they're younger or adult children, just the exhaustion of it? And now for parents with young children, they have potentially got a very big weighty decision to make. Should they give their child, who's 5 and above, primary school child, a vaccine? They may not feel like they have all the information they require, and it will be acutely stressful for many of them.
So I'd say 2 things. The first is about making this decision around the vaccine. Work out what your values are. Are your values around keeping your children safe, or are your values about buying a bit of time until you get more information? That's going to help you in your particular process. You can maybe get a little bit of information from media, you can get information from friends, from scientists, from reading articles, from watching programs like yours and the guests that you have on, the brilliant guests you have on. But at the same time, work out what your values are, because if keeping your child safe is your priority, then maybe you're going to err on the side of having the vaccine. The other thing I would say in a more general term about Christmas is to recognize, and I hope I'm not being fanciful if I say this, but in a way, the Christmas story itself is very much geared to how to cope with a pandemic, not just about the birth of a baby. And I'm not really talking about whether you're religious or not, or whether your religion is Christianity or not, but the Christmas story is very much about plans being derailed. Mary and Joseph weren't planning on having a baby to begin with. They weren't planning on having a baby in Bethlehem, and they certainly weren't planning on having a baby in a stable. But at every stage, their GPS of their life changed, and they had to accept the new reality. And to some extent, that's where we are now. And children are very resilient, but they are also very imitative. So if you want your child to be calm and stable around this rather chaotic period of time, they are going to take their lead from you. So you need to also marshal your resources to be as calm as possible and as stable emotionally as possible, even if your plans for Christmas are now completely up in the air or have actually been rather spoiled. There are ways through this. And again, I'm not particularly religious, but I'm taking comfort from the Christmas story at the moment to say that actually, even if things get derailed, if things don't go to plan, there is still quite a lot of joy and beauty that can be had out of all of this.
Well,
Lucy, thank you so much. Really appreciate your insight, just looking at it from a different perspective, from just, the reality of how we're all feeling, and happy Christmas to you too.
Now, coming up, could cancel culture and political correctness wipe out comedy? Maureen Lipman thinks so. We're going to be asking comedian Jonathan Cogan what he thinks coming up.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Welcome back. You're watching The Great British Breakfast with Simon McCoy and Rosie Wright.
It's 20 to 9. Now, new research suggests that children's innate immune response is the reason why kids are better at fighting coronavirus than adults. The study compared COVID infection in adults and children across multiple organs, and it might help explain why children are less likely to become seriously ill from the disease.
Well, Dr. Marko Nikolic is a co-senior author of that study from University College in London and a consultant in respiratory medicine. A very good morning to you. We're hearing from Angus Dalgleish about this. He was talking about T cells and things. Why are children better at dealing with this than adults?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really interesting question. I mean, at the beginning of the pandemic, we were really intrigued to find out exactly that. Why are children generally protected from severe COVID? So what we did is we collected samples from the nose, trachea and blood of many healthy and COVID-infected adults and children, and we captured single cells and analyzed which genes are activated. And to our surprise, we identified multiple explanations for why children are protected. So in the nose, kids have a very strong immune response. Actually, the immune system is already pre-activated, so fighting the infection straight away and stopping the virus from spreading to other parts of the body. Whereas in adults, the nasal immune response is weaker, allowing the virus to spread elsewhere. And this is actually how we think it gets into the blood, where unlike in the nose, we show that the immune response is much stronger in adults than in children. leading to immune-related damage across organs. And this just really illustrates that the immune system can have both beneficial and harmful effects in the same person with COVID.
Yeah, does this research give any indication about what should happen if there were restrictions in terms of closing schools? And because people often said schools particularly were these super spreader events, and therefore they were one of the critical things to protect teachers and all those parents to keep everyone separate from each other.
So I don't think, we can comment on, or I can comment, on school closures and restrictions. Certainly, I don't think our study can comment on that. There are other people who are much more qualified to comment on that. What we can say in terms of clinical applications. And maybe I can just give a little bit of background. So the reason why we're saying that kids have a stronger immune response in the nose is because they have high levels of interferons. And these are special immune molecules helping to fight viruses non-specifically. And these are expressed at much higher levels in children compared to adults. And the obvious kind of questions in terms of clinical applications from our study is, can we artificially actually activate this protective immune state in adults? And I would say yes. This has already been explored in a clinical trial where they were using inhaled interferon therapy with quite promising results. But the other question is whether knowing your interferon state helps in risk stratification. So what I mean is knowing whether you are at a higher or lower risk of getting severe COVID, so ending up in intensive care or not. And what we think could be done is just to use a nasal swab to measure the immune response in newly infected adults, or even before they get infected, in order to identify those at higher risk. So low interferon levels would mean high risk, high interferon levels would mean low risk. And those infected adults at higher risk may be ideal candidates for early COVID therapy. And we know, I think the other people on the program have said, there are all these new drugs already available, such as antibodies against the COVID virus, or these oral pills you can take against COVID. And then we know going forward, there are also new drugs being developed, and one of them is this mentioned inhaled interferon treatment.
It's good of you to join us. It's positive. It's all positive. Dr. Mark Nikolic, thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Now, the number of military personnel supporting the Welsh ambulance service as drivers will be more than doubled in the new year in response to extreme pressure. The Ministry of Defence says an additional 184 Armed Forces personnel will be made available to support the Welsh Ambulance Service NHS Trust from the 4th of January.
Well, Jason Killens is the Chief Executive of the Welsh Ambulance Service, NHS Trust. Very good morning to you. Jason, I mean, this is good news as well, but just how much pressure are you under at the moment?
Well, it is good news, and of course we've been under extreme pressure here in the Welsh Ambulance Service for many months now. Essentially, we've got three things that have been going on. We've got pressure on our workforce as a result of COVID, so high community prevalence, and of course that's now exacerbated with the new Omicron variant. We've got more work than we've ever had, and this is true right across the UK ambulance sector, and has been carrying on again through this year with record levels of activity coming into our 999 control rooms. And then thirdly, we've got pressure across urgent and emergency care, which is leading to delays in our crews being able to offload their patients and emergency departments. Those three things coming together have meant we've been under extreme pressure as an ambulance service here in Wales, and indeed services across the UK too, for many months now. And we're grateful to the military support we've got, because that's helping us put more ambulances on the streets to get to more patients more quickly.
Just give us the logistics then. What do those military personnel do to help?
Well, this is the third time we've had military support through the pandemic. We've had about 110 Armed Forces personnel with us for a few weeks now on this third deployment. And as you said, we've confirmed today that that will be rising to over 300 in total early in January. The military personnel receive a familiarisation course with the equipment and the vehicle in the ambulance, and then they work alongside, assisting one of our clinicians a paramedic or emergency medical technician responding to calls across Wales. And whilst we recognise this is perhaps not as ideal as we would like, it does mean we can get to more patients more quickly whilst we continue to be under this extreme level of pressure.
Well, we thank you for your work. We wish you a Merry Christmas, as good as it can be, even under all this pressure. But thank you very much for joining us this morning. It's Jason Killens of the Welsh Ambulance Service.
Matt, it's just gone 8:45. The actress and comedian Dame Maureen Lipman says comedy is in danger of being wiped out because of fears from performers of being cancelled. Cancel culture, as you know, is a term used to describe attempts to block and cancel people who hold a certain viewpoint, often one that isn't politically correct. Well, Dame Maureen described a revolution taking place and said it was in the balance whether we'll ever be funny again. It comes as polling suggests that over 50% of the population feel like they censor themselves from fear of being judged.
Jonathan Cogan is a comedian and musician. Jonathan, is she right?
She's right. She's definitely right in the extent that cancel culture is a real thing. Now, I don't think it means that everyone who's ever got in trouble for saying something is a victim of cancel culture. But I definitely think as a zeitgeist, it's very real and people are more afraid than they used to be, for sure.
What are they afraid of? What are the type of topics, comments, you might not now even want to talk about them, the areas where maybe when you're performing you think, actually, I'm just going to veer away from that?
Oh, no, when I'm performing, I like to dig into it because I've got a death wish. But I think generally people are afraid of this big boot stamping down on them. And that can be discussing various topics, often to do with religion, race, sex, gender. And it kind of, I guess it depends on what the real hot topic is at the time, is how much trouble you're going to get in for talking about it. And it kind of depends. It kind of varies every year. And I've seen it happen to people and I've seen it happen to famous people. But then again, I've also seen loads of comedians kind of make a career just kind of joking about those things in good faith, not actually trying to hurt anyone or genuinely be offensive. They're just discussing these issues because they're very culturally relevant at the moment. So it does kind of go both ways. Although people are getting stamped down, it's also allowing other people to really rise up, especially with some American comedians. At the moment, that's what I've seen. I'm an idiot. What do I know?
Well, you're not an idiot. You're a comedian, and I'm just wondering when you've got an audience in front of you. When you tackle issues which are perceived to be political correctness, and comedians can do things at the expense of that, which others can't get away with, and you must sense audiences going, "Oh, thank God, somebody's still got the guts to have a laugh, to take the mickey out of these things."
Yeah, well, it depends where in London you gig. I tried that in Highgate once and it didn't go down so well. And then I've done it in central London when it's been raucous applause. So, it really does depend on the particular audience. And you never know, really. That's why it's kind of so exciting and nerve-wracking at the same time. But yeah, it really just depends on, I would say, like, if everyone is on the same kind of page, just up for a laugh and not looking to get offended, then you can kind of discuss these issues and joke about these issues and it's fine. But if everyone's there like out for blood and just wants to stamp you down, then it's not going to go well. But then it's your job as a comedian to kind of work with that particular crowd and adjust it. But yeah, it's definitely, there's always a risk of people not liking it, but that's true with any joke. You can say horrible stuff that isn't to do with any of these cancelable topics and people still not like it. But that's always the risk.
There is a line, though, isn't there? And part of your job is just trying to veer on it. How do you test out a new joke? Who do you trust where you can try and work out where that line is?
So I've got a very close group of friends, and some of them are more on the centre-left, and some of them are veering slightly centre-right. And if they both laugh at it, then that's generally a good kind of balance. If only one laughs, and it's like, okay, well, maybe that's a bit too far. But then again, you just got to try it out in crowds. Sometimes stuff that I might think is a bit, not mean, just a bit heavier, goes down really well. And then sometimes something that seems quite light, people just don't go with it. You just got to try it out. And that's the thing about comedy, is you can't really practice it by yourself. Guitar, you can just sit in a room for 6 hours and play. Whereas comedy, you need a live audience to do it in front of. Otherwise, it's just, that joke doesn't really exist until you've done it in front of someone. And
this is your moment. Here we go. You've got a live audience. Give us an example of a joke that you think, well, it's a bit edgy. I'm going to give it a try, and we'll give you our honest opinion.
What's the worst swear word I can say at 8:50 in the morning?
I would say if it's a swear word, really none of them.
Oh, that's all my jokes. No, what do I think? What's like quite an edgy joke? Well, I come from a Jewish family, so I've got quite a lot of Jewish material that would go down. Why? I don't want to say because I'm scared.
I'll tell you what.
But this thing kind of defines a bit of the problem, doesn't it? This sort of unease, and I know it's different at breakfast time and what you can and can't say on the television, but this nervousness about where the line is.
I mean, Maureen Lipman says that comedy's going to die if this goes on. Is she right?
No. It will just maybe in the mainstream, but in terms of people putting out their own podcasts, their own sketches, their own shows on the internet, no, there's like a real renaissance for comedy in terms of like getting stuff maybe on the BBC or Channel 4. Yeah, I think that's getting watered down. But no one watches that stuff anymore. That's over. It's over. Long live the internet. But it's kind of a shame.
You're frozen on us, so we're going to leave it there. But Jonathan, wish you well. Have a good Christmas. Jonathan Kogan.
Thank you for having me. Have a good day.
Nice to see you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jonathan. It's gone 10 to 9. Now, a very different story. The oldest family tree in the world has been reconstructed through the analysis of ancient DNA taken from a Stone Age tomb in Britain. Now, according to the new study, researchers extracted DNA from the bones and teeth of 35 individuals buried at Hazelton North, Long Cairn, in the Cotswold Severn region. They found 27 of them were close biological relatives and were from 5 continuous generations of a single extended family. The group lived around 3,700 BC, approximately 5,700 years ago.
Well, Dr. Chris Fowler is Senior Lecturer in Later Prehistoric Archaeology at Newcastle University. This looks exciting. Were you excited when you saw it?
Extremely. This is really our first view of a Neolithic family and really how that family structure worked. So, yes, it was extraordinary to see these things come in.
So how different was it to our sort of nuclear family that we have in, 2021?
Well, I think the thing here is what we've got is in the first generation, there's one male and he had children by 4 different women. And we can see within the tomb, if you look at the family tree, you can see that, yes, great. So you can see on the right there, there's a sort of branch of the family, and they were buried in the south side of the tomb. So the tomb's got 2 different entrances and 2 different sets of chambers within this long mound. And one half of the family you can see there buried on the south side, and the other half of the family buried on the north side. And this is really interesting because all of the majority of the people in the tomb are directly related to that first man down the male line. But actually the family is then divided up depending on which of those 4 women you're descended from. So both paternal lineage and also maternal lineage were really important. And that's really one of the key findings of the study.
What can you find out about social structure from something so old?
Well, this is what's extraordinary about it. I mean, there are all these decisions that people are making when they build these tombs about who they're going to include in the tomb and how they're going to design the tomb. And in this case, what we can see is that they've designed it to have these 2 pairs of chambers, these 2 sets of chambers. So from the outset, there's an idea that this is going to be used by a community that is united, and they're working together to build this monument, which is really projecting descent and the family into the future, creating a lasting monument. And then when they're using it, they're also considering who is related to who as they're deciding who to put in which side of the tomb.
It's quite incredible that you can extract DNA from their bones and their teeth, work out that 27 of them all related. How long did all of this take?
A couple of years.
I mean, it's an absolute wealth of research, and it's completely fascinating, as you've laid out, to sort of explain what families looked like sort of 6,000 years ago. Thank you so much for explaining some of the research to us. Really appreciate your time, Chris, coming on The Break with Vet, and happy Christmas as well.
Yeah, Christmas. Well, that is just about it from us. It's our last morning together.
It is totally the end.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for having me, I have to say. It's been a real pleasure. I'm going off on Christmas holidays.
I'll be back next week. on the
You will.
week. And yeah, in the meantime, from all of us here at GB News, have a wonderful Christmas. Coming up, we've got the briefing. That's with Tom Harwood. And news bulletins, of course, on the hour coming up as well. As I say, from all of us, have a very Merry Christmas.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello, good morning. Well, the weather's a good bit more unsettled now for the next few days. We've got some rain moving its way northeastwards across the UK today. Still some snow likely across northern Scotland tonight, but milder towards the southwest. And you can see we've got